On behalf of the Board of Education, we'd like to congratulate the students and the teachers again, and also let you know that certificates were prepared for each of the students and given to Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith, I have a question for you. Sure. Okay? I've been reading in the paper a number of local businesses are Bellport graduates. Are you aware of that? The Dairy Queen in Medford are both Bellport graduates.
I didn't know that one, but I do know that there's quite a few, and actually one of our business mentors, National Business Capital, is owned by a Bellport grad, James Webster, and they've been a tremendous support for us, and we've also had other businesses come in. So there are quite a few entrepreneurs coming out of Bellport High School.
Well, hats off to you, and Solbol, the acai company in Patrick, I believe they are.
That's actually my son.
That's your son?
So I teach these kids and I teach my
Wow, you do a really great job. I'll take a peanut butter with Well, congratulations once again. I did, there's another one on his way?
He's got about 20 of them open, and there's one opening in this area. So.
Oh, good. Really? Very excited. We'll let you know as soon as we find out. Well, congratulations. He does a wonderful job. All right. Let's give another round of applause to our... All right. Your report now. The superintendent would like to report.
Thank you. Just to report on our calendar, at first I hope everyone made out well. Yesterday stayed warm and weather event. I'm not going to close it. Yesterday was our third time we need to close. As a result, school will now be in session both Friday, May 25th and Tuesday, May 29th. In the event closures need to occur, makeup days would move into good weather. Next item, online registration. After months of planning and preparation, our online student registration went live a couple of weeks ago. Parents can now access the link on our central registration page to register students new to the district online. I'm happy to report that the mid-year indoor-outdoor air quality investigation has been completed at Frank P. Long. The results of the testing during the heating season yielded no recommendations or corrective actions. The full report is available on our website with the other testing results as well. I'm also happy to report that installation of the air purifiers at Frank P. Long is well underway. 30 purifiers have been installed, and we are awaiting delivery of 25 more units to complete the project. We did recently hear from the governor's office, and I was able to preview the training presentation with regard to the gang training we had talked about earlier in the year. The presentation has been made in cooperation with the Suffolk County Police Department and the New York State Troopers. We have scheduled training for our administrators and responders for tomorrow. Sometime in the near future, we will be scheduling community presentations through our South Country Community Leadership Network as well. And then finally, as many of you know, today was Nationwide Student Walkout. Nationwide protest was organized as both a memorial to 17 people killed on February 14th as a result of the mass shooting at Stoneham Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. As the event is a grassroots student initiative, it was important that our students not only had a voice in organizing today's service, but that the actual ceremony was presented entirely by the officers in our student council. We are going to move to... Thank you.
Need some new mics. It's not on.
Jordan LaGreta.
Yeah.
As a part of the national walkout, Bellport High School created a memorial to honor the victims of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and to call an end to school violence. Over 700 people peacefully assembled in a gym in memorial service that Student Council organized. As Student Council President, I would like to say that I'm very proud that everyone, students and faculty, united as one. We have over 200 letters created by teachers and students and have created a banner to send down to MSD High School, which is signed by the Belport High School. This is the third year we have been selected to participate in the Charity Champion Competition, which will be doing a dodgeball tournament and a Stay Awake-a-thon for Mercy Ministries. Student Council would also like to say a big thank you to Randy Miller for coming up to the high school to educate us more about the events that occurred on 9/11 and from our trip to the memorial in New York City. Thank you. Oh, and if you look to your left, that is the banner that we have created that students and faculty have signed today during the memorial.
And the members that have been memorialized are noted on the banner.
So all the 17 victims are on there with their age and their names and a picture of them. So it was really nice that everyone came down. So a big thank you to everyone who did.
Who are the students? Are there students here who participated in the memorial today? Why don't you stand up? The students who participated today, let's give them a nice round of applause. Thank you for representing our district and Belport High School so well. Is that it, Jordan?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Griffin?
No report.
Hi. Huh?
It's been so long, I can't remember.
All right, I'm also going to forego a report because we have so many presentations to hear about tonight. Mr. Santo?
Actually, do want to remind everyone that tomorrow evening is Learning Advisory Committee, so they're welcome to attend that. And one thing, I've mentioned this a number of times, and I feel the need to mention it again since we're fast approaching before we know at the end of the year. I'm hoping that we put this on a future agenda item in terms of rethinking our committee structure. I found that this year we seem to have had our quarterly meetings and not much else, and I feel like we're losing a lot in the process in terms of some of the issues that need to be addressed in the district. So I'd like to see us look at revamping that process, and also specifically our hiring committee. I found that as I look at what we've accomplished or what we still have to accomplish, we had a number of important positions that hadn't been filled this year, and we also seem to have had some issues with retaining people in important positions. And from that standpoint, I think we need to look at, what issues we're facing. If we have a committee and we're not able to retain people that we've hired, then maybe there's something wrong with the process. So I really would like to see that we put that on a future agenda to discuss.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing for me at this time.
Okay. Now we are up to public commentary for agenda items. The guide to board meetings. Just reminding you that community members who wish to address the board will need to complete and submit the yellow comment card to the district clerk. Public commentary will occur 2 times during the meeting. First at the beginning of the meeting for agenda items only, and second at the end of the meeting for non-agenda items and agenda items. Comments for each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Total time for the public session is limited to 30 minutes. Comments relating to a personnel matter or individual students will not be entertained in public. Public commentary is a time for the board to hear comments from the public, not a question-and-answer period between the board and the public. If asked, informal questions requiring short answers will be addressed. However, the board will not enter into any dialogue with speaker during the commentary. District residents who will seek additional information will be guided to an administrator who will address their questions or concerns. For more information, you can see our guide to meetings. Now we will start with Annette Williams. And if you can just go to the podium to my right.
It's over here.
My right, your left.
Hello. My question is that my daughter was being bullied in school. She was threatened. You speak of a threat assessment team, but none was mentioned to me at the time. I also emailed the board, and I spoke with Dr. Gianni as well, and I've never had any follow-up. So I was just wondering, where does follow-up come
Commented
on?
before
Where does that
at Board of
play?
Ed meeting.
And what is a threat assessment team made up of if it wasn't brought up to me when my daughter was bullied? Or threatened, I should say.
We'll be talking about that assessment team tonight, and Ms. Williams, I did call you back and left a message on your cell phone.
When was this?
I don't have it here, I'll call you again tomorrow.
Not in your notes? We can't keep driving.
If you can call me tomorrow, that would be
We'll
wonderful.
follow up on it. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
She has to come to a board meeting to find out what's going on with her daughter being bullied. That's ridiculous.
Next we have Gina Aconi. Is it Aconi? Acona?
It's Ancona. I'm speaking today regarding the security of our schools. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Board of Ed for taking their time away from their families to run our school district. I know many of you are parents of students in this district. Unfortunately, like my child, yours too are vulnerable to threat. Since the Florida shooting, I've been researching and polling and doing some more research on where our district excels and where we're weak. First, let me start by saying that the day after the Florida shooting, our superintendent called us to say that the schools are on lockout, and that extra security measures are in place. The very next day, while on lockout, I had to go to school to get my son's homework, and during school hours, he was absent, and I was buzzed in by a security guard 10 feet away from me, who was slouching in his chair and never once asked for my ID. That's unacceptable. I'm not known to the school as my son just began in September. There's no excuse to assume that I belong there in any way. From my poll and research, the only thing I can see that we have going for us right now, besides the great faculty, which I love, is the auto lock system in the schools. We do have that, and our neighboring districts do not have that. What we need ASAP, whether it pierces the tax cap or not, is that every child in our school needs a scannable ID card that needs to be worn at all times. Every school needs a vestibule with an ID scanner and a real security guard. Every security guard should have military or law enforcement backgrounds. They need to be armed. We need them to look like security. The khakis and the lasers are not cutting it. During a serious matter, they are actually can be hindering help aid to the children. We need more resource officers in our district. Each school's threat assessment team needs to include a resource officer or police. Since the Virginia Tech shooting, Virginia law requires that every school in the state has a threat assessment team that includes law enforcement officer. They must be a part of every team in every instance. We need metal detectors in at least the middle school and the high school, and we need a zero tolerance policy on threats of violence and with stricter punishment. Our district's lacking the discipline. We need major improvement. We need better security and better security measures now, not when it's too late. I don't want to be running to the school praying my son's alive, and I don't want our community to endure such a tragic event.
Thank you very much. Next we have Tony Huffine. And Ms. Huffine, you requested both agenda and non-agenda, so this would be for the agenda.
Hi, because this is budget time, and when I was on the board, it was very sad to see that transportation was denied the second time, the second year for pre-K. Can I ask what's happening now? I would hope that it's in the budget for this coming school year. Will we be shown that with the presentation? Is there an answer?
Yeah, transportation is this evening.
Say that again?
Transportation is being presented this evening.
Yes, is pre-K going to be taken care of with busing, transportation? Is it in the budget?
No, it's not. It's not in the draft proposal.
I just, truly, that is so lame, it's hurtful, it's just ignorant is what it is. I thought we were going to work towards that. I thought this was the year it was coming. Okay, so we'll look at scores that will continue to plummet because the kids will never catch up. Does anybody get that? I don't know. The second thing is the courtyard. All right, just enhancing the courtyard, that's in the budget, correct? It's in the resolution. Well, it costs money, so therefore it's got to be in the budget. Yes?
Let me just back up to your comment about the busing. We don't have the total numbers in yet for the state aid, so it's safe to assume that the final decisions about the budget are not made yet. I just want to say that to you.
I don't know.
It's not in the draft budget now because we don't know what our full state aid is going to be. We haven't gotten into any negotiations yet about what's going to be and what's not.
Okay. Just briefly, and I don't want to use up my time on this so much, this weekend I was in Washington, D.C., and just happened to be in the middle of a huge minority, it was almost like it was a get-together of people who were part of a club. They were all minorities. They were college graduates, they were black, they were wonderful, they were doctors, they were lawyers. And I had the opportunity to tell them, do you know what? My district is not providing transportation for our poor minority children. And I gave them my email address, and I hope it goes to Washington, honest to God, because I think it's a really gross injustice. I'll talk about the courtyard now. The courtyard, apparently there's hopes and designs for putting grass in there, whatever, enhancing it. I'm not sure the purpose of that, except that for me, it just waters down to window dressing because the school, although there may be grass in the courtyard, the air is bad. It may not fit the criteria for closing the school, but we all know that Frank Long is a sick school, okay? But there's something that you should be aware of is that the time that I was in the school, that courtyard is a fire trap. Children shouldn't be there. There's no egress to outside directly. The kids go in the courtyard, and the doors, you have to go through the school to leave. If there was a fire in the school, they would be stuck there. We never allowed children in the courtyard. So all of that is beyond me. I don't know how that one came up. So you should look into that, whether or not it passes the fire safety test. I'd like to talk again off the agenda. Okay?
At the end?
Yes.
Yes, certainly.
Very good point.
That concludes our agenda item request.
But don't they have to have all the numbers in before we
Next,
vote?
we're on to the,
Don't they have to have all the
items
numbers
for
in before we
discussion.
vote in May?
Yeah. What can I say? And then you get half the story.
I'm gonna have to ask them that specific question. Because how can I vote if I don't know what the budget is?
Okay, so our first presentation begins with a review of codes 1,000, 5,000, and 9,000.
I'm just gonna have to talk in that mic better. Seriously.
Is fall asleep on me? Rodney, I think my clicker fell asleep.
Can't even afford a decent sound system.
You have to talk into my hearing aid.
Your hearing aid?
Yeah.
Hogan, is there heat in this auditorium?
Yeah, it's freezing.
Or is it just me?
It's freezing.
It's always cold in here.
Cold in here?
Yes. My feet are freezing.
This kid is so short, this black cat. He goes
Okay, so
technology.
code 1000, general support. This code area
Should hire
includes
him
budget lines for Board of
Yes.
Education, district clerk, annual budget vote and election, central administration, operations and maintenance, and utilities and insurance.
Whoa. Go a little faster.
Okay, so for the Board of Education, no significant change in these code lines. As you can see, the one major or significant reduction, you'll see 1040-160, and that is salaries for district clerk, as we had a retirement last year. Budget lines for superintendent schools, again, no significant changes. The one change you do see here is a reduction in 1240-160, salaries for administrative assistants, and that is because half of the district clerk is tied to my office with regard to an administrative assistant.
I gotta read those.
The area of finance,
Not
this is
accurate.
the business office.
200,000.
These include salaries for everyone in
base.
the office as well as
Right,
items that
that's his
support
base.
the office. Here we have, in terms of changes,
That's not
we
the
have
I know.
proposed an
That's
increase
what's
in
costing
purchasing agent from half-time to full-time. Purchasing is an enormous task that continues to grow, and also we plan on passing on some responsibilities with regard to inventory to help to some corrective action issues that we had earlier in the year, as well as assist with payroll.
I really wish they would put these up on the website. They never did. They never put these up on the website. Ever. No.
Personnel, costs included in this item includes the APPR and evaluation management. Here you do not see any significant changes at all.
Oh, thank God they put the heat on.
Legal and public information, again, no significant changes. However, one added item is an item that the board talked about, I think it was about mid-year, and that was the addition of a public relations specialist. We did attempt to secure someone for that position and did not, and I had told the board that I would include it in this draft proposal. And that is right there on line 1480-160.
That's ridiculous.
Operations and maintenance staffing. One change that we do have here, or actually a couple of changes, this line includes the addition of a custodian at Belport High School to assist with some of the cleaning needs here. We do also have security increase due to district-wide usage and needs. We used a little bit more security this year, and that line that code had been cut some years ago, and we have increased it somewhat each year, and we are still not at a position where we are appropriately budgeted in that area. Maintenance, operation maintenance and materials and supplies associated with that. Here you'll see a slight increase, mostly due to new projects, district HVAC upgrades. We're replacing a vehicle in the maintenance department. We have been replacing vehicles every year for the last 3 years now because our vehicles are really not in very good shape, and of course, there's more money to fix than they are to simply replace and be able to reduce the repairs budget. We also, in this area, are environmental testing and general maintenance. So two items that are generally asked about are 1620-44-9 contracted services and 1620-490 BOCES and what are in those lines. So what we've done here is give you some examples of what you see in 449 as well as 490. operations and maintenance, material and supplies continued. Maintenance supplies, custodial supplies, glass repair, etc. Again, no significant changes here. Central printing and data processing. Here you'll see a change as a result of recoding an administrator salary to the district-wide data administrator. As you recall, we made a change last year at the end of the year or into July. Actually, we talked about it at the end of the year, but actually made a change in July where we assigned an assistant principal to assist to do district-wide instructional data. This is a recoding of that position. So it's a shift of the monies to put them in proper codes. Other increases of BOCES used due to Chromebooks and tech support.
Did they ever change the windows in Franklin?
Nope, I asked. Nobody knows where the money went. And since those people...
Insurance and associated costs. Here is, you'll see liability insurance, which is divided into student accident and general liability. BOCES number is a number that we have based on our participation with BOCES. It's divided among all school districts that participate. And this budget represents our estimated share of that cost. Moving to code 5000 or transportation. This includes all student transportation. No real significant change here. We are in an agreement with our bus company right now, which calls for a contractual increase of 2%. Based on needs, we found the need to add a route. So the increase that you see here is a result of that contractual increase of 2% plus one additional route. Code 9000 or undistributed. This code refers to the budgeted items paid to agencies rather than vendors or individuals. The term undistributed means that the item is not assigned to a function for which it is expended. So first, we take a look at governmental obligations, our employee retirement system, teacher retirement system. These numbers reflect projected retirement system rates for 2018 and 19, as well as increase reflects budget salaries and expenses for 2018 and 19. No real control on these lines. Look at this one, impressive. Employee benefits. Increases here reflect projected expenses and current trend rates. Life insurance, disability insurance, etc. Okay, summing up these three codes, we look at projected expenses in central services, code 1000, a difference of $490,000. I'm going to skip curriculum because we're going to do curriculum next. Transportation, an increase of $210,000, and benefits and debt service, which is a reduction of $163,000. These numbers reflect all reasonable requests from our budget managers. Please also note that these numbers will change. It is a draft budget. We haven't gotten Board of Education feedback. We still need to do some teasing out of staffing as well. So they will definitely change. Looking at the revenue side, based on the allowable tax levy limit, we could go to the public and not pierce the cap for $1.1 million. Our state aid right now, which is the governor's proposal still, is an increase of $396,000. We have a slight reduction in miscellaneous revenue. The board still needs to determine where they would like to be with the designated fund balance. And then the debt service transfer. The board may recall that that line, we need to give that money back to the public. We talked about it last school year, and at that time, we agreed that we would give back $600,000 per year for 5 years. We did that 1 year. So if you continue what we talked about last year, that would just move over to $600,000. So our financial challenges. Contractual obligations increased to $1.8 million alone. Tax cap levy limit, 2.01% or $1.19 million. We continue to have underfunded and unfunded mandates, have limited state aid funding. The state proposal is still unknown. In fact, the Assembly and Senate came back with quite a different number than the governor proposed. So I have a feeling that we're in for a long haul with regard to where we land in terms of the state budget process, which moment we have in the beginning of April. So our financial challenges, and we're going to revisit this at the end of the next presentation, but it's a nice slide. It puts both revenues and expenditures on one page to let you see where we are and where the gap is. So when and it shows you the 3-year look, 16-17, previous year, 17-18, current year, and 18-19, the projected year, and what the difference or what the projections are in those areas. So right now, if the board were to do a $4 million fund balance appropriation, something we have talked about in the past, and move the $600,000 over, I think we are at a current gap of about $398,000. So you did the math for me. So while the current gap says $4.9 million, it's not that if you're going to appropriate fund balance and move over the debt transfer, service transfer. Questions on codes 1,000, 5,000, or 9,000? Jeannie.
It's not for
You're not allowed to ask. You had your chance.
You had your chance. But I didn't see.
I know. That's how they do it.
I'm going to do it anyway.
Last budget presentation, the gap seems to have widened quite a bit in the difference between the revenue and the expenditures. Am I wrong? I don't remember a need of 4.9 million.
No, and I think what is a little deceiving is the fact that the fund balance isn't in there at all. Nothing's in there. Or is it $600,000 for the debt transfer? So if the board were to make a decision tonight or somewhere down the road that we were going to appropriate $4 million and knock down that 41 that we did last year and appropriate the $600,000, the gap is $396,000.
Okay. I'll be more, the next week's meeting, I'll go back to what I thought, because I'm not prepared right now. The next question is, you mentioned the Senate's proposal. I didn't see the Senate proposal, but I know the Senate released theirs today, and I guess the question someone could talk to her as well. And I didn't read all of it. I only saw the initial email from NISBA about a lion's share of that funding is projected to be foundation aid. Am I wrong on that? And I say it every year a couple of times, foundation aid doesn't help us in one way, correct? It hurts us. So I just think that's an important thing to remember as this is foundation aid, and you see this big increase, and it helps the city. It helps like 2 or 3 districts on Long Island. We're not one of them.
That's correct.
That's a big problem if they're going to propose an increase in such a huge percentage of the budget is going towards foundation aid. These numbers could change drastically. Am I wrong?
Well, I don't know. We wouldn't be losing foundation.
We might not be getting what we need, though.
Setting the stage for.
Could you speak into the mic?
Yeah, I can't hear anybody.
Speak into the mic. Thank you.
Because the last time we looked at some numbers where they gave us like $400,000 in foundation aid, but then they took $700,000 away somewhere else.
Exactly.
So it never helps us.
Continue.
Questions of the board? Okay, continue.
Okay, so the next presentation, which was scheduled for tonight, is a review of 2000 codes or curriculum and instruction. Okay, so Code 2000 is by far the largest category of expenditures. All regular elementary and secondary classroom and other instruction, special education, extracurricular, including clubs, intramurals, and interscholastic athletics is included in Code 2000. So beginning with curriculum instruction salaries, here you can see curriculum, secretarial support, supervision of regular education, clerical, central reg, et cetera, moving down the line. No significant change here. These increases reflect contractual obligations and additional need for substitutes district-wide. Here you'll also see a recoding of that administrator I talked about earlier because it's in a couple of places. At Central Data Process Code and a retirement. It's a little difficult to see it because we have the retirement of someone as well, which is a reduction. But again, no significant change in this area. Curriculum instruction, contracts, materials, and supplies. Actually, a slight reduction here, and it's based on need. Included, however, K-8 classroom libraries, some programs that we are using, the new cadet course at the high school, and the continuation of System 44 and Read 180 licenses. It also includes K-6 literacy consumables, math manipulatives K-8, and some E&L starter kits as supplies. Continuing with instructional salaries, these are basically your teachers, and also included in here are enrichment. You'll note that robotics for both middle school and high school here as well. These increases reflect contractual obligations. We also have projected an additional 1.0 full-time equivalent position for the dual language program. And we also have projected 1.0 FT or full-time equivalent position for a behavior specialist. We currently have a contract out behavior specialist basically for special education. We feel that we'd like to hire one within our own district that we could use with our own teachers, mostly in general education, because the contract that we contract out for is with special education. Many of our teachers could use help and support with some of our more challenging students, and that's what the specialist would be. And I believe they would also be working alongside with the vendor that we do contract out with. Teaching assistants, aides, and monitors, general and special education. Here we do have some change, an addition of one full-time equivalent for guidance department, a teacher assistant to help support our guidance counselors in working with youngsters when they come in terms of college and career support. Right now, students can either schedule appointments or wait for counselors when counselors could be seeing other students. So these type of services, a TA could be assigned and be able to help students with Naviance or collecting materials for college or career, and work under the direction of the guidance counselors. We have proposed an addition of 6 full-time equivalent TAs for Frank P. Long instructional support. As the board will recall, we did hire some 12 instructional TAs last school year to support K-3 in literacy and math in the classroom. Frank P. Long has none. So these 6 TAs would be similar to what we're doing in the K-3 buildings and would be assigned to the building and then assigned to the classroom by the principal in terms of supporting the classroom teachers where need may be. And that could be ranging from general education or special education. And then we have a recode of the food service salary from honors code to transfer to food service. It's 2110-164. Additional instructional costs. Have provided additional costs or funds for additional charter school students, may they happen, additional building equipment requests, and that is the significance of the slight change in this area. The area of art, No significant change. These are changes that reflect contractual obligations and additional art equipment that's needed and requested. In the area of music, we have 2 retirements in this area, which drive the salary reduction. And we also have allowed for equipment replacement and upgrades as requested by the principal and the chairperson. Private education, this is basically a self-sustaining program. No change in this area. Special education salaries, you'll see a slight increase here, which is offset by 3 retirements and contractual increases. We're projecting an additional 1.0 full-time equivalent for elementary and 1 for secondary. We'll have more detail on the staffing requests and assignments at our next meeting, which is a staffing analysis next week. Special education additional program costs. No significant change here. Contracted service increases reflect additional services required by the CSE. Have some increase in out-of-district tuition due to projected placements. Decrease in BOE services proposed. Expenses due to projected enrollments and placements. And an increase in BOCES OC-Ed. Special education. Occupational education, projected retirement and contractual increases here. This area includes our business technology and family and consumer science teachers. This also includes the CTE program. We currently have, I think, still 48 youngsters involved in the BOCES program, which has been an increase for the last 3 years. We get billed for BOCES on a 3-year average, so changes do not impact real big when they come, but over time they will, because we have been growing the program. I think 3 years ago we had, or 4 years ago we had close to 0, and we started with 12 and or 17. 21, and now we're at 48. Summer and special programs. Instructional salaries include curriculum writing expenses. School. Also included our before and after care enrichment program in our K-5 buildings. Is a self-sustaining program. So that program, while you see an expense here, it's counterbalanced by our revenue. Library, media, and computer-assisted instruction. Increases reflect contractual obligations. You'll also see the addition of a 1.0 FTE computer technician. This is offset by a BOCES expense. Currently, we contract 3 technicians out from a vendor. We're looking to absorb 1 of those and only contract 2 out and make and build our force within in terms of having people that can work on our needs without having to worry about the contractor substituting someone else in. It also includes Chromebook licensing costs for computer included in computer software. Guidance and health services includes our guidance department. It increases reflect contractual obligations. Additional guidance office and testing supplies are included here. Also included here is the addition of 1 full-time equivalent nurse that we did add mid-year, well, a little over mid-year, in terms of 1 additional nurse that provides for substituting for other nurses, and also when we're doing testing within the schools. That program is working well. However, I don't have any data to support what kind of savings it's brought to us, but it has helped us in terms of securing substitutes in our buildings. Psychologists and social workers, increases here reflect contractual obligations, and we are requesting an additional half of a social worker. and half of the social work will more than likely be placed in an elementary school. Co-curricular activities, club advisors, chaperones, intramurals, additional chaperone use due to increased district security and event needs. Increases here. Physical education and athletics. Director here, teacher salaries, coaches, trainer, etc., official fees. These increases are reflected of contractual increases, prior reconditionings, projected secondary retirement, also brought some numbers down, and some needed equipment replacements.
Director got a nice raise. What?
So we're back to the slide that we ended the last presentation with projected expenses. Here you can see, and we'll just take a quick look at curriculum, because as we mentioned earlier, curriculum is the lion's share of the budget, and we do short $1.5 million. Same slide as before. Figures reflect all reasonable requests made by budget managers. Over the next week, we will be meeting budget managers and having discussions with regard to teasing out these staffing requests, so we may have for the board a more finalized staffing projection next week. As I mentioned earlier, please note that these numbers more than likely will change as we go through. Projected revenues, again, no change from the previous slide. Contractual obligation or financial challenges, no change. Financial challenges, again, same as previous discussion. I don't know if the board would like me to sit on this slide to answer any questions.
Just sit on it.
Yeah, leave this one.
Okay.
We'll talk from here. Start.
I'm sorry, you cut out a minute.
I cut out?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I was just asking who would like to start. I'd like to speak to the designated fund balance. This was a touchy subject last year. I was one who was advocating for more money to fund program need. I was understanding of not using reserves for everyday financing. And so you spoke to wanting to recommend $4 million this year. We used 4.5 in 16, 4.175 in 17. And you spoke briefly to 18, 19 of 4 million. Do you have any more to that?
I spoke by way of an example of what we talked about last year, not as a recommendation for this year.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Griffin?
In looking at some of the line items, it says payments to charter schools, $360,000, and then tuition is another $180,000. What's the difference between the payments to charter schools and tuition?
Dr. Burgess is going to
Do you have a microphone, or can he step to the microphone? Could you step to the microphone, please?
Thank you.
There's two aspects to charter school payments. One is for general ed, which is the 300-some-odd thousand number, and then there's the special ed charter school amount, which is the 180,000.
I didn't even know we had charter school.
Before you sit down, Dr. Burgess, could you speak to the closing or the potential closing of the regional Mercy Regional School, and if that may have an impact on the district as far as receiving students back?
We may. I do know that there's a potential of pulling back one bus that would go to Bishop again. We may receive a handful of students, 10 to 15 back, potentially.
So when one goes, the kids still need to go somewhere, right? So I don't know if you want to count on any closures because kids aren't leaving.
No, good point. Right? Mr. Puccini?
Yeah, I'll just state, and I know we're early on, but initially, and I know we haven't really completely rolled up our sleeves, but I personally have an issue with such an increase over last year's fund balance transfer. To go up to 4.9, almost 5 million, when our efforts were to go the other day, and I know you said we can get that number maybe before. $100,000, $150,000, $175,000 a year isn't really the significant impact, at least that I know I would be comfortable with, based on the conversations over the last few years, was to really roll back, pulling that kind of money out.
Are you suggesting below 4?
I mean, I understand it's hard to say that now, and I know we have the full budget line by line, and now it's time to start getting into that, but yeah, I mean, I was hoping we were going to be into the 3.5, 3.6 range, especially considering the tax levy is by the highest I think it's ever been since it was initiated, and we're able to go to the taxpayers for more than we've had, so why wouldn't we save it on the other end?
Sure, or you could look at it in terms of possibly staying at the 4, which I believe is a healthy amount to stay at, given our reserves, and not go to the levy. Stay below the levy for the resident.
If that's a plan, I could be okay with that as well. I mean, so to your point, if we're going to designate money from fund balance, it should have a benefit to the taxpayer when they go to the polls that day or down the road. So, yes,
agreed.
We're not going up to the 2%, which is the levy limit.
0.01.
Then, yeah, I'm fine with being there at 4.9 or at 4, excuse me. But I want to dive into codes now and start talking about the same codes we always go to, the workers' comp and the insurance and everything else. So those underutilized, so to speak, codes.
And we haven't rolled our sleeves up, so to speak, to use your words, in terms of looking at the budget. And I would love to be in a spot where we didn't go to the levy. I don't know if that's possible. Staffing is the lion's share of this budget.
Sure.
We have to get a handle on that. It's really premature to have it now. And while I think the next slide says finalize staffing next week, it'll be pretty finalized. It's not going to be finalized. We'll be done by the time we do our work session in April. But as you recall, our count was a little different this year, and the staffing presentation got moved up a little bit. So it's a little tight in terms of getting that information, but we're going to work really hard in terms of getting as much information as we can for next week.
But part of what you just said too, I guess a question for Dr. Gerges, at this point or sometime in the next presentation, if we don't go to the full levy limit, it puts us in a bad position the following year, not. That's right. So, and I think that's something that needs to be, as we go on in the future, explained to the public, because if you don't use all that levy limit, what you're able to increase on the next year is on the lower amount. And so I believe we may be better off protecting the taxpayers by reserving fund balance versus the levy limit. But I truly believe that we need to have a more in-depth conversation, because I know it's very difficult to understand for people like us who are involved in it. Somebody who's casually listening, paying attention at home, it could be very difficult to understand. So I'd be very cautious about not going to the limit for that.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that everyone, the board, I believe you do understand the current gap that's listed on this slide is not the gap.
Correct.
That's just because the debt service transfer is not listed in there, and the designated fund balance is not listed in there. But if what you had said earlier, if those two amounts were in there for the 4.6 million, we would only be looking at a gap of about 398,000, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And there was another comment I wanted to make, but I forgot. Come back to me. Mr. Santa?
Well, actually, I did want to echo what Ms. Pacini said, you know, having gone through a number of different budget cycles now. There's always been information in the newspaper constantly talking about 2% cap, and realistically, we've never actually had a 2% cap until this year. Some years our cap was actually below 1%. So in not utilizing the 2%, as you said, we just end up hurting ourselves next year in the formula, so we really need to be careful about that. A lot does remain to be seen. Maybe by some hope and faith we'll have a budget in 2 weeks from tomorrow before the holiday break for the legislature in Albany. But at this point, we just never know. So it's so many things that still are to be determined and quite frankly out of our hands. Are we almost where we need to be in terms of scheduling on the secondary level, because that also impacts the FTEs that we need in relation to the retirements?
That's part of the issue. Scheduling is not done, nor is it done this early. We can only project out.
Then of course we still have to go through the whole CSE process in all the buildings, so we don't know what type of mandates we're going to need in terms of special education teachers and aides and so forth. I did want to say that I was very pleasantly surprised to see and happy to see the inclusion of teaching assistants for Frankie Long in this budget. I have for many years, and I don't have enough eloquent words to speak how important it is to have an extra pair of hands in many classes. So if all other things being equal and our gap is only 3.8, I'm pleased to see that the money is being put into people who are going to be those extra set of hands in classrooms, because that pays off exponentially in the classroom. That to have another set of hands is a win. And if building principals have that ability to assign that staff as needed, because sometimes you do have a class in a particular building that might be a little bit more challenging, and have another caring adult in the building really makes a difference. So happy to see that, and would be more than happy to work around whatever fund balance we need to keep a valuable program like that.
I did remember my other comment. The demographic study that is pending with BOCES, that will play a factor too on staffing. And could you just speak to a little bit of how that will help us in this budget preparation?
Sure, we're moving along with the demographic study. Hopefully, we were hoping to have it this month or beginning of next month. That's a little challenging. However, all the information is with Western Suffolk BOCES. They're coming to do their site visits next week. My understanding is those site visits are just putting, so to speak, face to the paper, right? Seeing the spaces. Hopefully, and Dr. Burgess tomorrow is going to apply some pressure to try to get that study moving along. In terms of cost, it depends what comes from the study. I'll tell you without the study that less kids are going to Brookhaven than Frank P. Long, than Kramer. Okay, Kramer's, and you can tell, I'm sorry, next week when you see the staffing presentation, you'll see the class sizes. And that's the indicator right there. Class sizes of Kramer are much higher than Brookhaven. For whatever reason, years ago, when the district drew the lines, those regional zones are no longer feeding those schools appropriately. Too many kids are going to Kramer. So my guess is that demographics going to come back and say, you need to redraw your lines. Take a close look at it. Or you need to reconfigure. I don't know. So in terms of redrawing your lines, there's generally not a huge cost associated with that because you're moving kids. However, it's a process that I've been through. Take a great deal of community input. You just don't tell families that they're going somewhere else. And a lot of thought and planning needs to go behind it. Would we be able to do it by the end of this year? It's possible. Possible. Question is there a pocket somewhere you could simply say, you're no longer going to Brookhaven, or you're no longer going to Cranberry, you're going to Brookhaven? And then we could put things in place that, my previous district, what we had done, and we got relatively no pushback, was students that were already in the school were allowed to stay. They were allowed to stay and finish the year. Yeah, you can gradually work into it. So, but again, I'm really just talking off the top of my head. I'm looking at numbers and class sizes and telling you we have an issue with Cranberry. Hopefully the demographic will bring back more information, and maybe it won't have a cost factor.
Any other comments from the board? Yes.
Aren't you freezing? Aren't you freezing? Gwen, aren't you freezing with your lip?
You have 2 more slides.
I'm freezing.
Yeah, just to wrap it up.
He's warm.
Okay, so what's next? Finalize the staff projections, which is next week, and as I said a moment ago, that won't be real final, but we'll be pretty close. Review the current expenses and requests with budget managers for possible reductions. Hopefully, we'll be able to apply the state aid once it's finalized. The board will need to determine what it would like to say within the tax levy limit. Determine what the board would like to do to appropriate with regard to our reserves and fund balance. And then, as I mentioned earlier, budget presentation, staffing analysis is next week. Currently scheduled for administration building. I don't know if the board wants to change that venue, but it is currently scheduled for there. And then the remaining calendar for our budget meetings next week. April 11th is where the rubber hits the road, where we need to make the final decisions in terms of designated fund balance or any changes that the board may want to see fit. Hopefully next week, and even today, administration will get some feedback from the board, and we can even make some changes over the course of the week for next week, April 11th. All the slides.
Okay, thank you very much.
This always has to be next to him.
Okay, so the next item for discussion is video streaming Board of Education meetings.
Hey, that's me.
And at our last meeting, as the board recalls, we began to discuss this item and asked me to bring back some information for some further discussion. Scott did some work and provided some preliminary information for us in terms of equipment and software. Startup cost of approximately $5,000. That would include a camera, a streaming server, and any necessary software. It's my recommendation that there's 2 ways we can go with streaming. We can do YouTube streaming, which is no cost. We currently have a YouTube channel. No maximum connections. We can show off comments, and it does provide further closed captioning that will be required on our server. Or we can own our own streaming channel. Owning our own streaming channel would be a cost of $8,000. It's an annual fee. With a maximum of 500 people that we can.
Can't hear you.
If we were, the streaming would be a 500 maximum connection. I doubt if we'd ever go beyond that 500 maximum connection. And it would also include software and portal service. Difference with our own streaming channel is you own the product. So it's always there, it's in the cloud, whereas in YouTube, if YouTube also closed captioning is what. My recommendation is to start up and stream on YouTube. If we were to choose to go to our own streaming channel, which could have benefits instructionally, but we're not at that point making those decisions yet, particularly in the broadcasting class, we could benefit from having our own streaming channel as well.
Yes.
So recommendation is to move forward with the one-time startup of 5,000 and going with the YouTube streaming to start.
Comments from the board? Mr. Santo?
Just for clarification, in terms of the second option and the new broadcasting class, would that then be this 5,000 startup and then an additional 8,000 to have our?
It's an additional 8,000 to set up our own streaming channel.
But that would also be able to be utilized by the new class that we're beginning.
I would do that.
We'd be district, we'd be able to do it.
That's what I would do.
And at some point is our model to have our students actually do production?
That'd be awesome.
I'm hoping.
I believe that's the plan.
Yes, a project-based learning, please.
Yeah, should.
So regardless of which direction we go in, we need the startup cost of 5,000.
Yes.
That's clear. I also just want to make a comment that Mr. Nix couldn't be here tonight. He regrets not being here, and as everyone knows, this is one of his very passionate topics. So I would say if we go just tonight with the moving forward on the startup costs and the YouTube streaming, and then wait for the discussion on the channel, and then the project-based learning of having the class do it this way, Jack would be here next meeting to further the discussion. Does the board have any objection to that proposal? With approving the 5,000 startup?
That will come out of technology. I don't need a formal approval.
You don't? Okay. All right, great. So you just need our go-ahead, our blessing.
And would you, and a time frame? I mean, we'll try to get it in place this year, correct? It won't happen next week.
President Wong, any other comments of the board?
No, that was just my question, the time frame.
Okay. So as soon as possible. Okay.
I do have one quick question.
Certainly.
So would that camera and all of that be able to move with us when we move locations?
That
Or
is
do we need to stay in the same location?
excellent question. That camera would be mounted.
Okay.
So if we were to move to this venue, there would be an additional cost. We'd have a portable camera. But I think we'd be able to hook up with a laptop. Portable camera is not going to be $5,000, but it would be an additional cost.
If I can do it with
Because
my
we're
phone.
talking about a fixed camera and
I forgot.
trying to set it up where the picture will be able to take the entire board and also closed caption the speaker. Picture in picture, so to speak.
So then for the next meeting, why don't you bring back the costs of the portable?
Gotta have that.
Are you familiar with
Anything else, Ms. Allen?
My kids didn't go there.
What?
They didn't go
They
there.
didn't go there. No, presently, how many rooms are available? See what's happening is Brookhaven is shrinking.
I know.
Empty rooms,
All right.
reconfigure. You
We are
probably.
now on to the security emergency response protocol
Oh, here we go.
and procedures presentation.
Yes. And Mr. Briggs will make that presentation.
I thought it was the head of security. I thought the head of security was supposed to do it.
That was last week.
No. Maybe he couldn't come this week because he had to cancel the meeting. It was supposed to be last week.
Good evening. Thank you, Board of Education, for giving us the opportunity to review our school safety and security initiatives that are in place and are constantly being developed. One of the things I wanted to open with that a lot of people don't realize is, you know, one of the young ladies earlier stated it, from virtual enterprise, it takes a village. And, you know, we're going to open up with a brief discussion of our code of conduct. And in that code of conduct, it kind of lays out the expectations of everyone, not just administrators, parents, students, community members, responders, TAs, everyone. And that code of conduct is really the basis of what we do in the district for discipline and threat assessments, bullying investigations, and I know it's been a big concern. It's been a concern for many years. It started off back with Columbine when I was teaching in another district. Then we had Sandy Hook, and most recently Florida. So our code of conduct actually it promotes a positive school culture by all stakeholders. What I mean by stakeholders are those people that I just mentioned. Those people would be teachers, students, administrators, parents, guidance counselors, psychologists, social workers, responders, security, and teaching assistants. The goal of our code of conduct is to model good behavior. Realize that when a student does something wrong, not only do they need to be disciplined, but it's also a teachable moment. We want to take those students, we have to educate those students, we have to teach them, in many cases, the difference between right and wrong. We want students to learn from their mistakes. Our code of conduct actually has been developed over the course of several years, and it includes several levels and options for administrators based on the behavior. Interventions are based on levels of the infraction, and there are two different levels, or two different groupings. There's K to kindergarten to 5th grade, and 6th grade to 12th grade. And those levels of behavior are uncooperative behavior, disorderly conduct, disruptive behavior, aggressive or injurious behavior, and then serious, dangerous, or violent behavior. When a student has a discipline issue, there are those levels and options for the administrator, excuse me, to discipline those students, and those options are anything from a warning, a detention, an in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, superintendent's hearing, and at the same time there are levels of interventions, parent contact, counseling, referral to outside agencies, FBAs, BIPs, and contracts with students, including check-in and check-out. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about DASA. That's probably the biggest issue we've had over the last several weeks, is our bullying investigations and the increase of DASA investigation. The Dignity for All Students Act, which came to us in July of 2012, it was adopted, not by the district, but it's a mandated law. And then it was excuse me, amended to include cyberbullying on July 1st of 2013. Sarah, can I get a water? My mouth is already dry.
You know what he does best? Cars. I know. We all know. We all know.
So our DASA investigations, what ends up happening is there's a process that we follow as a district. Excuse me. We review our forms, we report all bullying incidents to New York State Ed, then we end up documenting and reviewing, excuse me, at the end of each year, in the transition from students from one building to another, we review those DAS investigations so they follow a student. What is bullying? As it says on the screen, bullying is a single incident or a series of related incidents where a student is subject to discrimination and or harassment by student and their employees on school property, or at a school function that creates a hostile environment by conduct with or without physical contact, or by verbal threats, intimidation, or abuse of such severe or persuasive nature that A, has or would have effect of reasonable or substantially interfering with the student's educational performance, opportunities, or benefits, or mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Or B, reasonably causes or would reasonably be expected to cause a student to fear for his or her physical safety.
My God, he needs to go.
When we do a DAS investigation, there's a series of forms that are used. The DAS investigation includes, number one, reports of phase 1, investigation of a phase 2, and a response. Just want to pull out those DAS forms so we can review them. Policy 7552, which is our DAS investigation policy, dictates what we do for DAS investigations. First, we have South Country Central School District Incident of Harassment, Bullying, or Discrimination Complaint Form. That form is done by an administrator and a team, and they determine whether there is an actual incident of bullying. If there is an actual incident of bullying, then what they do is they move on to the investigation form, phase 2.
Is he okay?
Sorry, this is a disaster right now. Yeah, I'm good. My voice.
Doesn't sound good.
All right, phase 2 of an investigation. If it's determined that there is a bullying incident, then what happens is we do an incident of bullying, discrimination, and harassment investigation. That is done by the administrators in a group of people in the building, the mental health professionals. That would include social workers, principals, guidance counselors, psychologists, and there is a separate set of forms that we then look at to see if there is an actual bullying incident. In addition to those forms, we have a victim interview form, which is utilized by each building. We have a perpetrator interview form, which is also used by each building. Disaster management. Each school has a building level school emergency plan, ERP. That plan is put in place and is mandated by state ed. There's a template that we now use across the district for each building, and each building has an ERP plan. That plan dictates what we do in the case of an emergency. And there are several situations that could take place in an emergency, and our emergencies falls into one of these categories. There was a shelter in place, a hold in place, an evacuation, a lockout, and a lockdown. Emergency response plans also contain elements required by law. Crime scene management, communications, medical emergencies, and health issues that have to be addressed. The emergency response plan also contains the following: accounting of all persons if there is an emergency, reunification if we had an emergency, and the students were evacuated to another location or outside the building, and they needed to be reunified with parents, staff. There is a process in place in the emergency response plan that accounts for those students, including attendance by teachers of those students when they're in another location. Continuity of operations is another procedure that is listed in the emergency response plan. Continuity of operations means that the business of the district still has to continue. And there is a process in place so that we can continue moving forward as a district. Then there's recovery and security also listed in those plans. Excuse me. Disaster preparedness, management, and response. Certain threats or hazards have unique procedures, roles, and responsibilities. Therefore, emergency plans also contain elements that are threat and hazard specific. So in your emergency response plans for each building, and again, each one of those buildings has their own, there's procedures for an active shooter threat, a bomb threat, and also there is a requirement of a crisis kit in each building. I know here at the high school they have 3 of them. I believe one is in the main office, one is in the nurse's office, and one is in the guidance office or the phys ed office. In those crisis kits, there's all the things that you would need in case there was an emergency. There's rosters for students, there's contact phone numbers, first aid kits, whistles, identifying pictures for all the students that you have in the building, and those must be there as per New York State. Threat assessment teams. Each school, and I know one of the parents had asked about this earlier, the threat assessment team. Each building has a threat assessment team. Threat assessment teams were put together several years ago. There was a committee developed, and it ended up that we had administrators on that team, we had teachers on that team, myself, and several other individuals. The threat assessment team came up with a process, and we actually adopted forms used by the federal government and Secret Service in order for us to evaluate a threat. Teams determine if a perceived threat is founded or unfounded, or substantive, or not.
Just give me your pen.
Membership of those teams. We have an administrator, and it could be several administrators on each team. Could be an assistant principal, could be a principal. We have social workers on those teams. We have school psychologists on those teams, guidance counselors or teachers, and responders. Those people make up your threat assessment team in a district, and when there is a threat, they get together. There's paperwork that they have to fill out. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. There's paperwork they have to fill out in order to evaluate whether a threat is real or not. Threat assessment team roles. The administrator is the team leader. School psychologists are team members, and they conduct mental health assessments. School social worker or guidance person is a team member. Their lead role is follow-up investigations. Teacher and or responders, team members, and they help gather information to bring to the team. And that can include several things. It could be interviewing teachers, it could be interviewing other students, it could be interviewing other administrators, just to gather information. And then all staff are reporters and are required to report any threat and provide input specific to knowledge of the students involved. Other people involved in the process here in the district of securing the buildings, and I want to keep in mind that even though we're talking about security, we have listed here school responders and how many we have in each building. I want to make it clear that everyone, I believe, has this perception that school responders only do security. School responders were originally hired not only for security, but also for the RTI process. and to build relationships among staff, students, faculty, and they're part of that RTI process. So here with the responders in the district, some of the new changes that we have district-wide supervisor who's with us tonight, sitting right here, Waverly Busby, and we thank him for everything he's been doing. He schedules trainings, reports issues to the building principal. He drives around the district and he monitors a lot of what's going on. He'll make sure that when he goes to a building that the responders are on post. He works with each building principal if there's an issue that needs to be addressed. At the high school, we have 14 responders assigned to the building. One we say to the booth, but that's the front door. And we'll get to the vestibules in a minute. And we also have a mobile unit outside. A mobile unit outside, as you'll see later in the presentation, we have several vehicles that are used district-wide, but we purchased 2 new vehicles for security. You used to see the Tahoes going around. Got rid of those, they were kind of tired and worn out. And just recently in the last year, we now have these small white pickup trucks that monitor, outside movement and are used by Waverly to go from building to building. Belport Middle School has 7 responders assigned to its building. Frank B. Long has 3 responders assigned to the building and 1 for before and after care. Brookhaven has 2 responders assigned during the day, full-time, and 1 for the before and after care program. Kramer Street has 2 responders assigned to the building, 1 for the before and after care program, and Crit's the same, 2 during the day and 1 for before and after care. And I know one of the community members mentioned something about law enforcement. We are looking to move towards that model. And we've constantly been trying to recruit more and more retired and off-duty law enforcement. That's a little conflict there. One of the things that we have to deal with is, number one, there's a cap on how much a retired person can make in New York State, $30,000 cap, which the state is talking about, I guess, pulling back from, so we may be able to get more retired law enforcement. The other issue is not only the cap, but availability. Often, a retired or off-duty law enforcement officer is unable to work a full-time day during the school day. They may have other jobs, or they may be off-duty, and they may have a shift that they have to cover somewhere else. So that's one of the things we're looking to do and move towards, but it's not as easy as everyone would think. All responders, and I know there's a bunch of them here tonight, all responders possess a New York State issued guard license. And again, I'm repeating myself, we're moving towards that retired or off-duty law enforcement model. And I think there's a lot of changes coming now with what happened in Florida, and we'll see where it goes. We're monitoring that as we move forward. We had, I don't know if you recall, but we had several years ago, 2 years ago, I believe, an independent security consultant. We had them visit the individual buildings, see what the process was in each building, how we were set up in each building. And there were recommendations made and some adjustments made to our system, but the current security structure and the hire of the district-wide supervisor, which is Waverly Busby, was one of his recommendations. Extracurricular activities and sports are usually, if possible, covered by off-duty or retired law enforcement whenever possible. One of the things we did a couple of years ago was we split the list. If you go back 5 or 6 years ago, we would have responders working. They would then work a 35, 40-hour week. Then they'd be doing events. And it became hard to manage with overtime and all those things. So now what we did for the after-school activities, sports, plays, parent-teacher conferences, anything after school, we have a separate list of guards that we look to cover those events. And if for some reason we don't have an off-duty or retired law enforcement person available, then what we will do is then reach out to the responders and ask them to cover. The principal is the immediate supervisor of all responders and the security in their buildings. Training. In August, school protocol is reviewed, as is Project SAVE. The response plan training is presented by licensed and registered security trainer Mike Macri. Mike Macri is retired law enforcement. He has his own school. He has been doing our training for several years here in the district. And he's the one that we asked to come in and do the training for all the security people. He also offers the renewal courses for those guards and tracks it every year, so that way we stay on top of everyone's license. Yearly state license is mandatory. There's a mandatory refresher course an 8-hour course every year, and a mandatory license renewal training of 16 hours. And if you do your 8 hours one year and then 8 hours the second year, that gives you 16 hours to renew your license. We also have done over the last year crisis prevention and intervention training, CPI training, with the responders, which we are looking to expand to other staff in the district. And the emergency response plan is presented by the principal in each building to the faculty and staff at the start of each school year.
I gotta wait till the end.
Drills. Drills are mandatory as they relate to the emergency response plan. We have to have 12 drills per year, 8 evacuation drills, 4 lockdown drills, 8 drills prior to December 31st of each school year, 1 drill during lunch or an assembly, so that we can instruct the students on how they should be moving out of the building during a more chaotic time, lunch or an assembly. 2 drills have to happen during summer school, which we did, and 1 within the first week of school. After school programs, events, or performances, that's when we basically instruct everyone and tell them where the emergency exits are. The person in charge must notify the attendees at the beginning of the program what the emergency procedures are. And we are currently looking to schedule a 3rd active shooter drill with Suffolk County PD. We've done 2 of those over the course of the last, I believe, 4 or 5 years. I know some board members participated, responders participated, a couple supervisors, administrators, and it's done here at the high school. We put the request out to Suffolk County PD, and they're looking to schedule a time that we can hopefully have another one before the end of the school year.
Hopefully.
Suffolk County Police Department and the utilization of Suffolk County PD. We have a school resource officer assigned to the district. Unfortunately, we share that school resource officer. I know that Dr. Gianni has reached out to Suffolk County PD on more than one occasion. I know that in the past we did have someone assigned here every day, depending on the heightened alert that may be going on at the time. We've had several school resource officers over the last several years. Brenda Rizzolo is our current resource officer, and she's actually been out on a medical leave. And Officer Skanga, we share him with Connecticut, PatMed, and several other districts. So as much as he's available, or the school resource officer is available, we do have them here. They do maintain an office in the district, small cubicle down in one of the administrative offices. And they're here as much as possible. Unfortunately, they're not here 24/7 or for the full school day. They are easily accessible by phone. Suffolk County PD is utilized, as I said earlier, with the retired and off-duty law enforcement for after-school events, sports, and emergencies when they're available. If we have a basketball game, we'll call over to the precinct or the SRO, and they will make someone available, give them a heads up at the precinct, and get somebody here for us. Suffolk County PD is also contacted and utilized for DASA if necessary. If we find out that in a DASA investigation, or even in a threat assessment, that there's something substantial there, and we need to notify law enforcement, the administrator will do that. And each case is evaluated on a case-by-case basis, but if there is something substantive there and it warrants calling Suffolk County PD, we do that. Also, I have their contact for the threat assessments, and if necessary, when there is a mental health evaluation, they will transport students to CPAP burn evaluation if necessary. Last but not least on that slide is the installation of school active violence emergency hotlines. That's been offered to us by the Suffolk County PD. Suffolk County PD, it's like a bat phone. They're going to install that. We're looking into that as we speak. And that way we can just, if there's an emergency, pick that phone up and have immediate communication with Suffolk County PD. Yes. Yes. Curriculum and instruction. We have that slide there to talk a little bit about our RTI process. RTI, if you go back several years ago, a lot of people talk about a no-tolerance policy. Well, you can't just have a no-tolerance policy in a school. We're mandated to teach, instruct, and have all students be educated. So we can't just take a student that has an issue, suspend them long-term, suspend them for the year. So we started the RTI process, and there was a pretty extensive training by Diana Browning-Wright, which started several years ago, and then includes tiers of intervention. Those tiers of intervention, they start off in the classroom, and that's where 80 to 90% of your issues are addressed. In the classroom, we expect that teachers will, be visible, the proximity to the student, just the way they handle situations will be handled in the classroom as a tier 1 by the teacher. Tier 2 and tier 3, there's an RTI team in place in each school that addresses the more severe, behaviors and the more at-risk students. And those would include interventions such as counseling, check-in and check-out, AIS, academic intervention services. All those things fall into the tier 2 and 3 categories. Faculty work through the RTI tiers of intervention with regular review. There's teams. They discuss the RTI process and where we're at. There's also the BZ. BZ is a student survey. It's actually not given to the student. The teacher conducts the BZ survey. And what it is to evaluate at-risk students and determine where they stand in the survey and what type of interventions they may need. There's externalizing and internalizing screeners for the youth, and the teacher actually fills this form out. It's done, I believe, 3 times at the high school. In the K through 8 buildings, it's done twice. In the process of the BZ, they rank students that are at risk in certain categories, and if they have a certain amount of, red flags as far as behavior, then they will be referred for other initiatives in the district, such as counseling, check-in, check-out, and some supports.
Do they tell the parents? What? Do they tell the parents? You have to have parents' signature.
Social, emotional.
Before they can go on with anything.
I have a list here I would like to quickly go through. Part of my process will probably be right through some of my notes.
Non-academic has to be.
On the social, emotional side, there's a number of things that are in place in the district. But May, we're looking to have a mental health day. We also have Red Ribbon Week, which is a week where substance abuse and a number of other things are addressed in the district so that we can make students aware of good and bad choices. Gang resistance education and training. The GREAT program is offered in grades 4 and 6. That's basically a program brought in by Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, and the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department will address gang-related choices and try to educate students on the negatives of joining a gang. There's also social media presentations by Suffolk County PD here at Belport High School, and currently the district is exploring Sandy Hook Promise, the Sandy Hook Promise Know the Signs program. Technology, and I think this goes to what you were asking. Currently, we have electronic visitor check-in at all schools. We do have the fob system in each of the buildings where a key is no longer needed. You just use a little blue chip and you're able to electronically come and go from the buildings. But we also have Scholarship, which was purchased by the district several years ago. And Scholarship, or the purpose of it, is many purposes, but each building uses Scholarship at the front door. And what they do with Scholarship is check in visitors at each building for all functions. They also, in some of the buildings at the high school, they check students in the morning, and it's linked to attendance. They also have the ability of moving the computers in the Scholarship machines to events such as basketball games or any other event, and check in visitors at that time. That way we have a constant record of who's in the building. So that is being used pretty regularly. We also have, and I don't know if it's listed there, yeah, the lockdown, I'll get to that in a minute. The electronic student ID check-in at the high school is done. We're looking to phase that in some of the other buildings, and in the cafeteria it is used, because there is issues with students not attending lunch at the right time, and they check in and out of the cafeterias, so that way they're only there in the periods that they're supposed to be. We have fairly new and updated radios with earpieces to confidentiality. You may see now that there's a wire going down to the radio on the security for each of the responders. And the reason we did that was for confidentiality of the students. Often you'll have radio communication from the responder to an administrator, and if they're discussing a fight or something that's going on, students will then see what's going on or hear what's going on and run to the fight because they can hear a location. So one of the recommendations was to go to these earpieces, so now the students can't hear what's going on and what the communication is. We have district-wide video cameras, which have been installed in the district. They've been here for quite some time, but there is a regular maintenance plan for those video cameras in the building, and we can surveil inside and outside the building. There's access to those cameras for each administrator at their desk. That way they can see, they can click each wall, they can click outside, they can then communicate with law enforcement if necessary, and it's been here, and it's been not only, I guess, a positive, almost positive for managing the building. You know, when you have a discipline issue, you need to get, some information. I know the board has seen those videos if there is a discipline issue that goes on, but they're not there just for discipline. They're there also if there was a major emergency. We need to monitor movement. We also have video cameras on the school buses, which are recording what's going on the bus. Again, not just for discipline, but if there was an issue on the bus, we can see what's going on. I already talked about the fobs, but in addition to that electronic lockdown system that we have here in the district, we have the option or the ability to lock down the entire building. You hear all these things about, lockdowns, lockouts. If there was a true emergency and we had to lock someone out of the building, or we had to lock the building down because there was an intruder or an active shooter, we have the ability. Each building has several locations with an emergency button that they can push. It's done by usually an administrator, but there is access by others.
I just want to
They
scream.
can lock the building down if they do
My
see
father
a
knows what I expected.
very severe situation. And the superintendent's office is automatically contacted whenever 911 is called. Automatically called to the superintendent. Facility and equipment improvements.
Doesn't come out of his office, so.
We just got the approval
Just throw out.
for an additional 2 west vestibules. We had the one installed here at the high school quite some time ago, and it
They
seems
just
to
did
be
it this
working
year.
well. I know Mr. Hogan has said positive things
they
about
just
now
changed it
having
like 3
visitors
months ago.
come into that vestibule, check in on scholarship,
It's such a
and then if they're authorized, they can go through the second door and go to the rest of the building or go to a meeting where they're scheduled. The plan has been to put those vestibules district-wide, but unfortunately we have to constantly deal with state ed, and there's been a delay in getting approvals from state ed. But if you see that the high school's installed, the middle school recently was approved, I think it was in the last 2 weeks, and it's planned for spring recess installation. Frank P. Long recently was approved, I guess at the same time as the middle school, and also is planned for spring recess. And then we'll see where it goes as far as the other buildings. We're still waiting for approval on that. New security vehicles, I mentioned already. We have the one at the high school, and then we have the one that Waverly Busby uses to go district-wide. And that concludes. There was more that I'd like to share.
Please do.
But at this point, I guess I'll take questions if there's any questions. I apologize for my voice.
Don't worry about your voice. There's no questions of the audience at this point. But if you have a question, why don't you write it down, give it to the clerk, and pass it to us, okay? Thank you.
That's when I said that I meant of the board. I didn't know.
Okay. Yes, I'd like to start. Okay, and then Dr. Griffin. Okay, so with respect to the district-wide video camera surveillance,
Yes.
there was a Newsday report last week that the county executive with the Suffolk County PD was looking to gain access into school video surveillance systems. Has the county gotten in touch with the district about that proposal?
No, they have not. I mean, I know what you read. I read the same thing. Vance asked me the question, and I know what everyone has read. However, Mr. Briggs and I are going to a school safety conference tomorrow morning, and the executive is going to be there. So I expect I will hear more information at that conference.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Piccini and then Dr. Griffin.
So I have a couple of things. But just on Ms. Lee's comment, if I understood it correctly, we all understood the same, the county possibly accessing our security cameras was only in the event of an emergency.
In the event there was an active situation, yes.
Some people have discussed it privately, so.
Can I add to that something quick? Something I wanted to bring up earlier was our emergency response plans. This year for 17-18, it's the first year that they're actually submitted to state ed electronically. We used to have to submit hard copies or download them, put them on a CD and mail them, and they would go to local EMS, fire department, Suffolk County PD, the sheriff's office, state police. And this year we were able to upload them into the system, and I believe they're going to have access to our emergency response plans if need be. They are not available to the public for obvious reasons. We don't want people to have access to that. But that's one other, I guess, mode of help or access that law enforcement and EMS has in order to help us if there is a true emergency.
And just the base also, you guys know this thing tomorrow, I mean, one of the things that I tried to advocate for some time ago, and we were partially successful, was I believe our district, I believe all districts should, and I don't think it's enough, but I think the SRO should be assigned to us, so when Floyd has their own SRO, they don't share. And that changed this year, because last year they didn't.
It actually changed last year. We had the full time.
Yeah, nobody told us.
Challenge on that.
Okay. What are we doing?
That's the, right now.
You guys
I
are
spoke
talking to
to
each
Superintendent
other.
last year.
And they didn't tell us
He
either.
had it for a year, and then he had to share it as well.
Oh, so he did have it.
He had it for a year,
Yeah,
but last
that's
year it
possible.
wasn't.
So that's possible. Because, you know, when you talk about, you know, especially Senator Croce has a bill that went forward with it. He's going to try to pass in regards to school safety. And one of the things that really struck out to me was that within the bill, it was putting a uniformed police officer in every school in New York City, but there was no talk of anywhere else in the state. And I thought that was crazy to me when we talk about armed guards. I'm not necessarily comfortable with private security personnel having a firearm in our buildings, but I would be comfortable with a uniformed police officer in our buildings. And I personally don't see why we have 400 school buildings in Suffolk County, why Suffolk County can't put more resources that way, but I guess that's for you to discuss with the county executive tomorrow. Entryway security, and very well aware of what we've done and what's been completed here at the high school. One of the comments I hear from parents, and I haven't necessarily experienced it myself, is that the protocols implemented to the buildings are not always consistent. And that's always a struggle for me. You know, I have kids right now in this building and in Critz, and I haven't had a problem, but I have walked into other buildings and been around, and, you know, it might be a little lax. I know I'm a familiar face, that may be a part of it, but I'm not so sure that our procedures and protocols should be, you know, less guarded in that scenario, especially in this time. So that's always a concern.
That was addressed within the last 2 weeks by both Dr. Gianni and myself, and I know that Waverly Busby has been going around to make sure they're doing the right thing. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but one of the things that happens is the responder who's consistently at the front door checking in those parents or visitors with scholarship, because they can scan in on the driver's license. They get to know the people because they're there constantly, and they've been directed to now check everybody's ID. And I'm not saying that it's 100%, but we're aware of it, we're on it, and I know we.
At what point in the school day, specifically, you know, especially something like the high school where the school day ends roughly 2 o'clock, what day is the, you know, is the car not there and the doors are open? Because that is always an issue for me sometimes, is that I can access to pick up my son for athletics or something like that. I can access the building usually pretty easily after school hours.
I probably, depending on the building, they could be at different age. But I know at the high school, I know they have security till 2:30 at the front booth. And then I know we have full-time responders / security for events outside near the parking lot, depending on where the event's taking place. And I believe one of the responders, he actually checks front door and side door. That's something, though, that varies from building to building, so I think I need to get you a little more information on
I
that.
appreciate that.
Is that right?
My question is 4 o'clock, is the basketball game going on, or volleyball game in the gymnasium? What's going on at this store? Is that door open? Is it locked?
Sure.
Is it locked?
And I have heard one time, a couple weeks ago, it was open.
Actually, Mr. Santo, Dr. Griffin was up.
I think she's got this.
That topic, or
Because I have one more piece. Okay, so my last piece is just on the first portion of the presentation in regards to the DAS. Okay, and so and I guess I really just want some more information from the superintendent on this, in maybe in the next meeting or in an update. I put on the New York State SED website, thanks to Shane for the help, and I didn't get a chance to do it earlier today. And in our district for the school year 16-17, I'm talking about the report. So let me ask a question. Based on what I read here, we're mandated to report all instances of bullying annually, correct? Not as they happen at the end of the school year, we upload this data to SED. So for the school year 16-17, our district had 18 instances of bullying in the state. I don't know if that's a high number or not, but what's concerning to me is Kramer Street had 4, Brookhaven had 1, Gulfport Middle School had 0, Frank P. Long had 0, Belleville High School had 13, and Turn Fritz had 0. So now, that being said, I spot checked some other districts, and there are similar disparities from building to building in similar school districts, and I only looked at it for a minute. So I would like to know if our own district records match what the state has, and if they don't, why? And I'd like to just a little bit more in-depth investigation into really what these numbers are and what constitutes bullying that gets reported to the states. It's my understanding any accusation of bullying has to get reported, but
Well, it goes back to the definition that you saw up there. And there's no doubt, and to speak to records, so
And
all
I know
our
you're
records,
prepared, and
I'm not prepared, I do want to get you additional information, but I also want to say that in terms of the records, we have the records to back up the data that's sent to the state. The issue that I think you'll see, and you'll see a significant jump this year as a result of what we're dealing with in terms of cyberbullying, social media. There is no doubt an uptick in this district and every district across Long Island as they go into bullying. I will bet that those numbers will be significantly increased.
I don't doubt it. Social media was a problem last year too, right? So, and I know that I'm sure there's an uptick, and there's, I get it, but again, I'll wait for more information, but I'll give you an opportunity.
I cannot believe it did that. Can't believe it.
Yes,
Well, just took away one of my questions.
Do you want to follow up on what Mr. Puccini was speaking to?
Well, two things, yes. I mean, I know that we've had some discussion about some of the evening happenings here at the high school, and definitely we need to closely look at security, especially when something's happening on one end of the building and often the other end of the building is not being covered. And I've witnessed that, and we've had that discussion before, tighten up our security. And just to piggyback off of the DASA question, I don't know if some of the disparities in numbers may have to do with just some of the changes in the DASA law. It could be. The other thing, though, I wanted to ask in reference to DASA is at one point we discussed, because we do not have always certified teachers substituting, we were going to do DASA training. We wanted to make sure that that has happened and it continues to happen.
Dr. Griffin?
Yes, thank you, thank you, Mr. Briggs. Appreciate you getting through the presentation, the road issues. I have a question for you about the program itself and how you handle one part that I didn't see there, the reflection on what is working, what's not. At what point do you have some kind of evaluation of what's going on and feedback from all the different stakeholders in the district, including parents? And how is that part of the procedures moving forward, considering some of the issues and upticks in social media and stuff like that? So there is more transparency on our priorities, and also making sure that we're getting the best, safest schools that we can, given all the information, not just moving forward with the program, but rather evaluating the program and saying, this is working, this is not working, how can we make it better?
Sure. And thank you for that, because actually on 2 of the slides there was a little reference to some of the things that we're doing related to that. And security, not only in our district, but I think nationwide, is constantly changing, especially right now with all the debate that's going on. But one of the things that we do now is we have a secondary school climate committee meeting on a regular basis. So for the secondary, we can talk about things that are going on, be it vaping, discipline issues, anything related to the climate within the building and what's working, what isn't working, who are the stakeholders, is everybody doing their part? The other group that we get together pretty regularly, actually once a month, would be the Progressive Discipline Code. We talked about the Discipline Code here, which is really the basis of everything that we do. And we have a committee, district committee, that meets once a month to talk about and review what's working and what isn't working related to discipline in the process. And we've probably had 4 or 5 meetings since last fall. It took us a few meetings to get our footing, to really see what direction we were going to go. And we actually have been going through the Progressive Discipline Code. We started off, a few meetings ago talking about parent notification, parent involvement. Now we're getting into those levels of discipline that I mentioned earlier in the PowerPoint. You know, the K to 5 discipline and the levels of discipline and intervention that are there. And then the 6 through 8, that's going to come at a later meeting. So we're talking about those things. At the same time, not only do we have our district meeting, school climate committee, I know that the buildings also have their own to talk to teachers, responders, and the faculty to see what's going on, and they make adjustments regularly. And we meet with those administrators once a month, and those issues are also discussed.
Just a follow-up question. If a parent does have a concern
Yes.
about bullying, about procedures, to get their concerns to these meetings so that change can be effected or things can be investigated, what's the process? What do parents do?
Thank you for that also. Number one, I know that the parents initially speak to the building administrators. And I hear about every one of those bullying instances. I don't mean to stray from discipline to bullying, threat assessment, but for all those things, it is shared with me and I share with Dr. Gianni. There are times where parents may or may not be happy with the process or the outcome. And if there's something going on, I being the district DASA coordinator, they're more than welcome to reach out to me, and then I will address it with any of the administrators.
Yeah, okay.
I know that one of the ladies earlier said she hadn't heard about threat assessment.
Yeah, okay.
Threat assessments and threat assessment teams, they're a tool for the administrator to actually investigate when they initially hear a threat. Threat assessments are done quickly, within a day, maybe 2 days. So if someone doesn't hear about a threat assessment, it's automatic that the building does that. That they will reach out, they'll look at a threat, whether a student threatens to, I don't even want to get into the many different threats we've had over the last, you've heard it, Dr. Gianni makes the Connect Ed calls. But if for some reason, a community member, a family member, parent, whatever it is not happy with the process, they can reach out to me. Email, I get it every day. Emails, phone calls, and then I will address it with the administrator, and hopefully we go in the right direction. It's not often, but it happens.
Not often.
That answers your question.
Yeah, because I think just from when I hear committees, it seems like it's always isolated or an individual parent dealing with an individual situation.
Sure.
And so sometimes the feeling of not being heard, or that the problem is not being solved, and that it's going to continue, is the feeling, and sometimes the reality that the parents are dealing with their children who are coming home. So I guess my purpose for saying this is I'm trying to get to a point where the community knows that the board, along with the administration, along with the teachers, keeps their children's safety and their education at the forefront of everything that we do. So I just want to make sure that that's as transparent as possible.
Sure.
Because we get the emails as board members, which also hear it in the soccer fields, and the baseball fields, the football fields, that there's security in knowing that we're trying to make the system work and trying to make sure that kids are going to school in a safe place.
Sure.
And sometimes it just seems like that's not the message that's does not respond too quickly. Results are not what's expected. But sometimes it's also more than that. The kid is coming home frightened, and that's the reality that the parents are dealing with. And that's why I think sometimes we talk about systems and procedures.
Yeah.
The reality is the kid's home scared.
Yes.
That immediacy of response from our end, from the district, that is what's getting lost here. Is that we're talking about a lot of processes and procedures.
Yes.
That kid's still going home that day, still, and
Thank you.
we're still waiting for something
Yes,
else.
thank you. Exactly.
Understood. And if I can piggyback on that, one quick thing. Often when I speak, not often, it's not that often, but when I do speak to a parent about a discipline issue, a DASA investigation, something, I almost feel guilty that I can't be more transparent, but there's that issue of confidentiality. And I know most people understand that. But if one or more of the students involved with the situation are classified student, identified, you can't legally share any of the information, not just with those students, with any student. You can't share what the discipline is for the other student. And those are the kind of calls that I get often. You know, my kid had a problem, and what happened to the other students? Did they get a hearing? How long were they suspended? I've had parents call and ask me, you know, what's the names of the other kids? I can't and wouldn't give that because I don't know where that's going to go. So you almost have to answer cryptically sometimes, or, you know, and I share that info with them.
If it's an incident between your child and another child,
I wish I could be more transparent in those cases, but because of confidentiality,
and who was
you can't
involved.
share everything.
Well, I get the confidential
If your
part.
name, if your
I
child
guess
is
the
safe,
point is more
this just
when the
went
kid
took
comes
place.
into school
What's
the next
wrong
day
with
and the
that?
kid that punched him in the head on the way up,
Right.
God, still in school.
Mhm.
That's more of like the immediacy.
Sure.
That the child doesn't see it, and it's not that you need to see or know the confidentiality part of the
Understood.
the aggressor, but the consequence for the action. I think speaks volumes. And once you
Should be known.
have that, that's what I'm saying. Like the process that we can actually look at the policies, procedures, all the different things that we have going on, and respond to some of those very real things that are being said, which are there's an action and a reaction, and the consequence should fit whatever the action is.
And I think communication, no matter what level you're looking at, no matter what the issue is, discipline, DASA, threat assessment, within the building, teachers, administrators. This actually came up the other day with the school climate committee and the progressive discipline. It's the communication piece. And we constantly need to adjust, make adjustments, and hopefully communicate better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's crazy talk.
Just for general communication for parents whose children aren't directly involved or concerned parents in the community, I wanted to remind everyone that if you do go to the home page of the school district website, and you just scroll to the left bottom, there are two links. One is to ask a question, so you can officially ask a question that will be answered by a school district administrator. So if you do really want information, that truly is a place to go. That's a resource that was put on our website several years ago in order to try to encourage and improve communication. And also on that page is a link about, did you hear a rumor? And that was something that I had actually seen in a district where I had interned at. And it was a very effective thing. If you truly hear something that concerns you, please use those resources, because then you will get a response from a district administrator. You know, because unfortunately, for better or worse, some of our communication tools are not really as effective as we would like them to be. You know, as a little girl in 3rd grade, I remember playing the game telephone. And by the time the statement got around the classroom, it wasn't what it initially began as. And unfortunately, that happens on Facebook. And not only with our kids on Snapchat and whatnot, but with adults. So please go to the actual source. Go to our school website on that home page, and please utilize those links so that we can have better communication, and hopefully having more and accurate information would hopefully lead to a better sense of security for all of us.
Ms. DeSanto, to your point, we had asked the superintendent to give a brief presentation on the website to direct the community how to and where to look for these sites. So could you please add that to one of our upcoming agendas?
Have it on next agenda.
There we go. All right, thank you.
I wasn't sure with our new dates.
Yeah, we do need to look at the agenda.
Okay.
I did have it for next time.
All right, great. Thank you. Any other questions of the board? Again, on behalf of the board, Mr. Briggs, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. And I thought it was very comprehensive.
I thought that was a
Gave
horrible
me a lot of knowledge
presentation. Are you kidding?
Items I wasn't aware of, so thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, and I apologize for, you can hear my voice, the rough start. And my nose got mixed up too, so.
Yeah, it was fine.
Hopefully staffing will be better.
Okay, thank you.
Since we've been talking about him, I'd like to ask Mr. Busby to stand up. He is our lead responder security guard coordinator. Those of you who had children that went to Burn Fritz might know Mr. Busby because he spent many years there. Did a marvelous job, and he ended up getting dubbed the security coordinator. Welcome.
Welcome.
They don't see them much as they'd like to.
Of giving you up, Mr. Bugsy.
Mr. Sanders, do you have another comment?
Well, one of the things that I was hoping we were also going to focus on, but perhaps may need to go on another agenda, is of course, we're talking about health and safety, and health takes many forms. And I was hoping that we might, if we don't have time tonight, if not prepared, on the next agenda, just go through some of our social emotional curriculum that we've actually implemented over the last 2 years now. That I know some parents, if you haven't had kids in certain grades, you may not have heard as much about, but it's a very important part of this issue. When you start to be able to address some of the different social emotional needs of all our children, and children are all very different, then you sometimes can actually prevent some of those discipline issues from occurring, and we really have a great program for that.
That'd be nice to know.
Thank you, Mr. Santo. Ms. Hunt?
I'm sorry, Tim, I don't mean to put you on the side. Mental Health Week?
It's in May, I believe it's the first week.
Any other comments from the board on that? Move on to the agenda. I believe this is Dr. Gianni's. Yes.
Okay, moving on to curriculum agenda items. Administration recommends approval of curriculum items reflected in schedules G1 through G3.
Need a motion for G1 through G3. I have a motion. Motion by Dr. Griffin, seconded by Ms. Hunt. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor of item G1 through 3, raise your hand. Ms. Malin here?
Ms. Malin left, she wasn't.
Oh, she did. I'm sorry. I couldn't see her hand. Okay, put them down. Any objection? Abstentions? The motion passes unanimously.
Moving on to personnel, administration recommends approval of personnel changes reflected in schedules H1 through H9.
Okay, same thing. Motion and a second. Dr. Griffin, seconded by. Do I have a hand on there? There we go, Mr. Santo. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of H1 through 9, please raise your hand. Put them down. Any objection, abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously.
And moving on to business, administration recommends approval of business items reflected in schedules I1 through I12.
And again, motion and a second by Mrs. Hunt, seconded by Dr. Griffin. Any discussion? All those in favor of I1 through 12, raise your hand. Thank you. Please put them down. Any objection or abstention? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we're up to our public commentary. This section of the agenda gives the public an opportunity to comment on non-agenda items and agenda items. Maximum time for each individual is 3 minutes with a total time of 30 minutes. We'll start with Nancy Dodge.
She did.
Next on deck is Caroline Wilkinson and followed by Tony
Caroline
Hoffman.
is here?
Yeah, she's right there. Oh, there comes Nancy. That's nice.
So, good evening. I believe that it's not only up to our children to make us proud, but up to us to make us proud, but for us to make our children proud. So I'm here tonight to address my concerns. As I look to all of you tonight, I see my neighbors, who I might see on the soccer field, in the neighborhood, in the supermarket, or maybe even in the library. This community supported each one of you when you first took the positions you sought, yet there seems to be a disconnect which is truly a shame. Some may blame it on social media. This could be, for instance, when a blanket statement is made about parents being hysterical. This is offensive and derogatory in the manner it is used. It is not my flaw to be concerned about my child, but the flaw lies with those who expect me not to be. That being said, something that I tell my kids, and some of you may tell your students, is if your answer doesn't make sense, keep trying until it does. So for me, the options given last summer about relocation options for Frank P. Long didn't make sense to me when several months later, a PR person was being sought at a hefty salary and $2.5 million was available for beautification of a school that parents, teachers, community members, medical professionals, and scientists have had concerns with. Now, I do know there's testing that was done, but again, the results didn't make sense to me. How can so many people be sick? So I sought answers. I reached out to different people, experts. Now, I know some parents and perhaps board members have questions about the experts that we talk about. So I found a man who has 2 masters, one from Harvard in toxicology, a second master's from NYU in environmental health, one who has served on numerous scientific advisory and peer review committees, including those of the National Research Council, the National Academy of Sciences, the National Institute, sorry, I lost my place. There's so many things to read here that this man's done. The National Institute of Assessment and the Congress and the Congressional Office of Technology Assessment is someone we could all agree could be called an expert. I sent him the publicly available testing results and he contacted me within days, validating the concerns of myself, teachers, and the community regarding the toxins present in Frank P. Long. And I actually did forget to mention that this expert is the lead scientist for the Center of Health and Environmental Justice. That would be the organization that formed from the community affected in the Love Canal disaster. For those of you not familiar with Love Canal, I encourage you to Google it. So, in knowing this, how come our community was not presented with the option that was given by the state of New York to relocate Frank P. Long last fall at no cost to taxpayers to a school in Sachem that is not being used? Again, for those of you who question resources, I know this option because I sat in the office of our State Assemblyman, Dean Murray, again seeking answers to things that didn't make sense. He told me that he presented that option to the district. Mr. Murray gave me permission to share that information with you tonight.
Wow.
I was completely taken back by not knowing about this option, and he had assumed that it was presented to this community, and he was equally shocked to know that it was not. I heard it directly from our State Assemblyman who's trying to keep our children and staff safe at Frank P. Long. This means that any teacher currently suffering, any child who has fallen ill at Frank P. Long this year has done so needlessly. To me, I don't feel there's a question that Frank P. Long will be relocated. It's the question of when. And to leave off with a quote from Winston Churchill, I never worry about action, but only about inaction. Thank you.
Wow.
Ms. Wilkinson?
That's crazy.
I'd like to get some clarification from the board if we received the communication. So Ms. Murray on, Senator Murray on the type of solution or anything.
Thank you, Mr. Puccini. I am not aware of any communication from the Assemblyman. No, this is not for you. And I also, this is the first I'm learning that we had an ability to move to another school.
In addition, I would like if the superintendent, the board president can reach out to Mr. Murray and maybe Ms. Dodge, unless you said it and I missed it, maybe somebody can reach out to Dodge, Ms. Dodge, to find out exactly what specifically was the recommendation he made.
Absolutely. We'll do it tomorrow.
Good evening. My name is Caroline Wilkinson, and I stand here today to speak of the grave concerns I have with transparency of this board once again. As some may know, I have been very active in the search for accurate, truthful answers to the mysterious illness around Frank P. Long. The more I correspond with the government entities, politicians, and this board, the greater concerns I have. Throughout this journey that started in June, myself and other concerned parents, teachers, and residents have uncovered a significant amount of inconsistencies in information, procedures, and the following of regulations. I've consistently written the board and the superintendent in relaying these concerns. These were met with semantic twistings of procedures followed and interpretations of letters, tests, and laws. I too recently spoke to Assemblyman Dean Murray, who happily conveyed to me that he and the DEC have been working since July to have an independent investigation from the state of the school. Dr. Gianni might have said this was a participation in a study, but in plain terms, this was a 6-month conversation between the DEC, Dean Murray, and the State Pollution Center to have the study paid for. To me, this appears to be an investigation. This is somewhat encouraging if they also look into the qualitative data of the illness present in the school or effects of combinations of chemicals. What I have to say I find even more disturbing is what Nancy had just stated before, because I too was at that meeting, as were some others. Dean Murray expressed his surprise and confusion of why our district did not take the state up on their offer to pay to relocate the school. It was stated that over the summer, Assemblyman Dean Murray first had met with a bunch of some of our citizens. He secured funding and approval from New York State, and New York State Education Department was involved. Dean Murray reached out to the district and encouraged them to take the funding, which he also said that he stated, this does not mean that you have to admit there's a problem, but just as a precautionary measure. Instead, our district decided to move on and tell us that to make any relocations, it would cost us in larger class sizes, elimination of kindergarten, and termination of teachers. All were not true. I feel those tactics are likened to bullying. What a terrible example to set for our children. I also spoke and wrote to you that they could not override you at this point to close the school, but you obviously knew that they would support the decision considering they were part in the process of making that, to approve the funding and relocation. Also, that you continue to state the DOH and DEC letters stating the school was safe. Another untruth, and this was brought to your attention a couple of times. Please remember, attention, and you and some of the boards continue to take the stance. Those letters were not intended to state the school was healthy. It was why the DEC, why is the DEC active in pursuit with Dean Murray to obtain an investigation through the State Pollution Institute? And why does the DOH have an approved study to investigate cancer clusters at Frank P. Long? If they deem it to be safe, it is an oxymoron and an insult to our intelligence.
Next up is Ms. Huffine.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's just a couple points that have to be addressed, and I just...
About the untruths of
How do you even know?
Until we heard from Ms. Wilkins. from Mr. Assemblyman Murray. I guess my question would be, I want to confirm.
Oh, my God.
Right now, and I think we can answer this question, that at no time did Assemblyman Murray contact the district and say that there were state funds available to us to move building.
That is correct.
Okay, that is said to you, Dr. Gianni?
You're out of order.
And the super, and I'm sure that investigative order, and that I changed the things.
You are out of order.
I'm not out of order.
You're out of order.
You all are out of order.
Thank you.
I changed the
Thank
things.
you.
The teachers union changed it. Everyone is a liar but you.
Thank you. That is true.
That is true. Everyone else lied with it?
Oh my God.
No, I said, no, that we have not lied. That is true.
Okay, then D. Murray, I'll tell him that you said he was a liar.
You don't have to bother. I will. I already sent him a message.
I checked with him to make sure.
Thank you. Ms. Huffline?
Gosh, I'm so distressed at the whole
Yeah, me too.
emotions that Frank P. Long has brought up and that are not being addressed, truly not being addressed. Dr. Gianni, you talked about the need for reconfiguration. If Brookhaven School has empty classrooms, and they will because it's shrinking, you could probably, well, you should look into reconfiguring the whole district, which should have happened a year ago when we first started talking about this. Put grade levels, it's just not necessary to have K through 3, 4, 5, all of that. It probably made more sense to do it another way, to reconfigure. But you have not even begun to do that. So try to think it that way. It may be just that the school will be empty and I have no idea what would happen to it. But, okay, that being said, Frank P. Long is a very sad situation and the board needs to take it seriously. Going to the budget, okay, I would ask the board to really take a look at a zero-based budget that addresses not the people who are the teachers, the TAs, and the people that are in the trenches with the children, but central office, okay? Look for the last 3 years and see how many additional administrators were added to central office. Look at the present positions, even for secretarial, that are in use. Are they really in use? Are they working full capacity? Take a look at that. Ask for the comparison because there's more money there for the size of our district than we need to spend and not concern ourselves with the fund balance because I'm telling you, if we take a look at districts that compare in population, you're going to see that we are really top heavy. Okay. I haven't been here for a little bit, just, my own personal issues, but I have to say I'm around the community, and here's what I hear. We had a great presentation, black and white, of the whole discipline policies that exist. It just seems to me that the books get bigger and bigger on how to and what to. When you come right down to it, all I hear in the neighborhood is that the middle school is out of control, that what happens at the middle school is shameful, that an AP who has respect and has done a respected job, I'm sorry, was taken off the job.
You cannot speak about personnel issues, thank you.
But this needs to be looked into. Right. We have problems with discipline in our schools, and you can put 10 more pages on that discipline book, but unless you have a personal touch, unless doors are open to hear parents who need to be talked to in a very civil manner and with emotion, then it goes away. It just goes away. You make people more angry as it happens. Given those couple of things, I would say, you, the Board of Education, I'm almost finished, and you're not going to like what I have to say. I would ask you, discipline is a problem. Education, our scores are in the dumps in the last 3 years. We have made no progress. We have hired directors. They have not proven themselves that because of the discipline issue, you, the board, should think about asking for the resignation of the superintendent.
Mrs. Shatman, followed by Monique Armour.
Thank you. I'm going to try to fit in everything. I was taking notes, and as I was taking notes, questions came to my head. First of all, Nelson. David, and then I'll come back to it. Just and how many bullying reports there were.
Ms. Shatman, could you speak directly into the
Okay.
Just lower it a little bit.
How
Just lower
many
it,
bullying
there you go.
reports were done at Frank P. Moore? Was it zero?
Based on the information that I said. Those aren't reported, okay, so.
No, if you could get that to me. At least. Current is fine, last year's fine too. Okay. As far as the presentation, I'd like to thank Mr. Briggs for doing that. I was involved when I was a teacher here on the Health and Safety Committee. I was here when Project SAVE came into effect. I served on the district committee. I went to all the meetings. I know all about evacuation drills. When I was on that committee, I brought this up. I retired, oh God, I feel so old, in 2003. I then served on the board for 9 years. I brought it up then. I don't know if it's still in the Brookhaven Elementary School evacuation plan, that if they have to leave the premises and not go out into the field, their evacuation place was Belcourt High School. At that time, I asked if there was ever an evacuation drill done with the help of the police, so the children and the staff knew what to do if they had to go to the high school. At that time, it was never done. I know that Crater Street evacuated to the middle school, and they had drills, but it was a closer proximity. So that's one thing I would like looked into. If it's still the high school they're supposed to evacuate to, how are they supposed to know what to do if they've never done a drill to the high school? I know there were drills out onto the field, but in the years that I was there, it was never to the high school. 9 years I was on the board, it was never done to the high school. So I would just request that that be looked into. Okay, give me a second here. As far as security and the information and what has to be done, what security is doing, I'm just curious. I know it's a policy now that you don't respond to anybody who's up here, which I'll speak about maybe another time. If any input was given by the security personnel, or as you call the responders, into the presentation, or anything that needs to be done, is working, is not working, what they would like to see. I think that you have to go to the people who are in the trenches and not just from people that know about it but aren't really there. So that's something else I'd like you to consider. As far as Frank P. Long, I have a granddaughter who attends there who's asked me to homeschool her because of everything that she's heard. Whenever she gets sick, she says to me, do you think it's because of, and I try to allay her fears. I told her she really doesn't want me to homeschool her, so that has calmed her down a little bit. On the Channel 7 report, and I'm not going into anything else other than something that was said in there, they had a chemical toxicologist that said that it is possible that a combination of all these low level of potentially hazardous chemicals could be causing a problem. The levels might be low, but the combination of them might be causing a problem. I don't know if that has been looked into by anybody who has done any of the testing, but I think that would be a viable option, because you all know you know, don't mix this with this because this is going to happen when you make that volcano project for the science fair. Don't you dare put that in there. So I think that's something that should be considered. And that number? Oh, okay. Oh, I thought that you mentioned it in the report. I must have missed it.
I made a comment through something
Oh, okay.
that I was corrected
Oh,
on.
maybe, okay.
And it was what, so Mr. Sheen corrected me, and whereas this report on the New York State Education Department website.
Go ahead.
Whatever was a founded, and I don't want to debate what's founded.
Okay,
or not.
just was founded.
So it was founded, so it doesn't mean that an instance of bullying wasn't reported to the school.
Okay.
If it's reported to the state, that means it was a founded accusation of bullying. Correct.
Okay.
And as I looked through the list a little bit further while we sat here, there are similar disparities. So for example, Metro Medford, I looked at that right next door. They only had 2 buildings that had any number of bullying instances listed. And it was a middle school and a high school, no other building, and they have twice as many students.
Right,
And
right.
their number in the high school was exactly double of what ours is.
And that high school was bigger, right.
So I guess there's a lot more to go through looking at it, and
Okay.
it can be debated later on whether it's a founded or it's not.
Okay.
What's reported is what's founded.
Okay, so the only thing that's reported to the state are the ones that are founded. So because I was told that by an administrator that if the DASA form was filled out in the school because a child reported a bullying incident, that would go to the state. So that's wrong?
That's wrong.
Well, I just want to know because that's what I was told.
So the state is, what the state was reported to the state are material.
Which
you
means?
So you had a definition set forth in this slide as to what a material is. Under your policies, there's an investigation and determination by administration as to whether it is a material incident or not, or whether or not it is an unfounded incident, or it is an incident that is an issue that is of concern but does not rise to the level of bullying.
Okay, so what I was told was not totally correct. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Alban, followed by Jenna Adamo. Jenna or Gina? Gina, I'm sorry.
Hi, I really wasn't coming here tonight to make a comment. I was coming to hear about the security presentation, and I have so many emotions right now listening to so many comments, but and I'll probably have a better statement next week when I can review more what the policy was for the presentation. But one thing to what Mr. Griffin was saying is I really feel like we are not listening to one of the most important pieces when it comes to security and feeling safe and what the needs are, and that's the kids. I, even as a parent, realized that I wasn't looking at things from their perspective, and they have a perspective that we need to listen to. They have concerns that they see every day that we don't see. And I'm kind of disappointed, well not kind of, very disappointed, that an example of that is that it's been over a month since that Parkland shooting happened. And before that, we had what I would consider one of the only probably major concerns of a threat that I've seen where an Instagram post went around that I thought was pretty serious. And all of that time, we haven't had one presentation that I am aware of with the children in the middle school or the high school. And I look around to all the other different districts, the families, for the kids in school, and I still don't understand, except for the walkout today, which was, I was very happy that the high school did that, very happy. The middle school decided to not do anything like that, and instead said if anyone wanted to do that, they would get a discipline. So I don't understand why we have one school that does it and the other does it in the same district. Either we're all on the same page or we're not. But I still don't understand why we have not talked to our children about this. It's like we have this district where we just try to think that if we forget about it or we don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. And that's not just about this issue. So I don't understand what's going on with everything's askew, why communication can't be open between parents and the board, between teachers and children, between principals and the parents. Like, I don't understand where all this divisiveness is coming in, but we've got to start coming together as a group, because we can't do it if we don't do that. But I really would like to see more, I don't know, passion and empathy or compassion or something from the people that are in charge. You guys. Mr. Briggs, I don't want to hear about all these discipline policies and this. I've read them all. What are we doing to help the kids and the school? Where are the programs? Where are the mentoring programs? Where are the best buddy programs? Where are the suicide prevention talks? I mean, there's so many things out there from people that have already used these that have shown that they can help. Where are all these things? That's what I want to know. I'm just so upset right now, just listening to how upset everybody is. Now I'm upset. But I just would like to see, I don't know what I want to see. There's so many different pieces, but how we've been doing it isn't working. It's just not. And I just think I still have faith that there's a way to do it, but it can't happen unless we have conversation. And I really wish we could have a town hall or some kind of one-to-one where we can ask questions just once. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so upset right now. It's upsetting.
So, I know you guys aren't used to hearing me, but one of your board members provoked me to get a group of parents together to really not go against you guys, but to figure out how we can work together. And the worst part of this whole meeting tonight is not one thing had to do with education. We are missing something. You guys are failing us, you're failing our kids, and by that, we're failing our kids by letting you guys get away with this. And I don't want to be mean or come off at you guys negatively, because like I said, I would like to work with you. But there's a problem when we're surrounded by DASA forums and security and pollution, and there's nothing about what we're going to do to improve our kids and our scores and get the kids to college on the fast track. We're a very diverse community, and there's something wrong. We need to use that as an advantage, and it's turning into this whole, it's horrible. I mean, it's appalling. It's really appalling. Now, as far as the security meeting, I was excited we were having one. It was disappointing. I'm sorry. I know you put this all in a PowerPoint. It was already printed information we all had already. This is not the way to present to a community of what you guys are going to do to better and improve it. We are already saying we're upset with it. We don't like it. I remember when William Lloyd, very diverse school, back in the 80s and 90s. I'm used to this. I'm used to fighting. I'm not going to say fights don't happen. It was 5 days automatic out of school suspension for both parties, and that was it. There was no question of what happened to the other kid, because you knew what happened to the other kid. There's no reason why we can't have a blanket form. Fighting gets you this, bullying gets you this. If it's up to a certain point, then it goes in front of the superintendent. There's ways to do it, and the excuses are just ridiculous, and they're redundant, and they don't mean anything anymore. If you guys refer to, and I'm talking to the board, even the community, look what Pat Med did this week on their security board meeting. It was town hall. Everybody got to comment at the end. It had legislators. It had 2 precincts because their school is made up of 2 precincts. It had their administrators. It had their whole board. It was impressive. It was an hour and a half on just security of what they're doing good, what's in the works, what was being done before the Florida shooting, what's going to be done now. They were talking to congressmen right then and there. The congressperson was answering them, writing things down, what they were going to send to Washington, how to alleviate the tax cap when we were improving security measures. That's the kind of meetings we want. We don't want to sit in front of a board, not be able to make a comment, and not get an answer when we do make a comment. This is not communication at its finest. You're a community. We're a small knit community, which you guys have to advantage. You don't have to answer to thousands and thousands of people like William Floyd's board or Pat Med's board. We're a small community. You guys need to take advantage of that and listen to us. There's no reason why we can't have a town hall meeting. The threat assessment team, there's no reason why a cop cannot be called to make a threat assessment. We already pay taxes to 911, so that shouldn't have to call to Suffolk County Police. So calling a cop during a serious threat, I feel is not adding any faculty or anything to the school, unless it is true that you guys lose funding by every 911 call, or that rumor has it. I don't know if that's true, but apparently there's rumors going around that any reports to the police can actually hurt and cut funding. Is that true? Okay, so then why isn't the security team, this threat assessment team, which I believe does not have the proper training to assess the threat, they need to go to conferences and need to go through training for that. But I don't see why. It's just to make us all feel better, a cop cannot be called to assess a kid saying that they're bringing a gun or having a hit list or a bullying to the point where a kid's ready to commit suicide. Everything, I'm so sick of a reaction. I want preventative stuff. And that's what I think we all want, is preventative stuff. And just really quick, I think that is all my point. But I really think that a town hall meeting and a meeting with the legislators and all that, if you go, they live streamed it, go on their website, their Facebook page, you can see and get ideas of how we could do things better. Pat Ned and William Floyd, both their superintendents, put out very classy statements after the Florida, shooting. And compared to our robocall, it was really pathetic. Really, really pathetic. If you go and refer to them. It's just about a sense of community, a sense of security, and getting education back at the forefront. And one more thing, I really, really, really hope that this was not presented to Dr. Gianni about a Sachem school being available to us, because if it is, that is not acceptable, and he's going to have to answer to that.
Let's go back to my bad and 2 questions for you. Thanks.
Oh, she gets to
You
answer
said you put
questions?
together a Facebook page to try to help.
It wasn't a Facebook page, it was a community of 40 members. Well, there's a lot more.
Did you have a meeting? Did you have a forum?
We did have a meeting. I've sent out emails.
Did you invite anybody from the board? Did you reach out to the district?
The board and the district were not involved. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't something to go against you guys. It was more of, these are the issues.
What were you trying to accomplish with that meeting? I'm just trying to get an understanding as to
Everybody
why it came together.
that came to the meeting, which was about 18 people, because it was during spring break, so it was a little, winter break, it was a little hard to get. But everybody that came to the meeting, it's more like a town hall meeting. They got to voice their concerns. I had them fill out surveys about the performance of the board, the performance of Dr. Gianni, about how they feel safe. I could give you and email you guys a list of the poll.
Did you email me on anything? Because I just did a search through my emails.
No, I did not email you.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. So, it was provoked by Chris, no offense. I mean, I'll call him out on it, yeah. It was a reaction to him trying to hush us or trying to make it seem that a kid with the threat of a gun wasn't a big deal because he had posted that on a Facebook page. And how it's rumors and, it's really, we're not idiots, we're adults, we're all educated. We're not, just because you have inside information doesn't mean we can't worry. Because we don't have that inside information.
I never told you not to worry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to address what you said, okay? A lot of times what's happened quite a bit, is that rumors start that aren't actually, we've never had.
I get that. This wasn't about that. That was about a gun in a school, in the middle school specifically, and you can ask anybody who got my email or my Facebook post of who wants to get together and let's see what you guys are doing, what they're doing wrong. Kind of thing, and where we can exceed. And I really did, I will email you copies of everything that I sent out as public knowledge, that I did say, I don't want to work against the board. I don't think that that's proactive. I don't think that that's going to get us anywhere. I think we have to really understand where they're at and what they do now to be able to even have other ideas or say that they're doing something wrong if we don't have an understanding of what they are doing now. The point is that whether you're a parent or a board member on that page, it's to be determined. Nobody knows. Not one person knows what hat you have on when you're speaking that. I'm not going to get a call when there's an active shooter. My kid's not going to come out the back door like your kid. And don't tell me that won't happen because I can tell by your reaction to everything.
Gina, just let me make a few comments.
Sorry.
The reason it's okay.
But he gets me upset, and that's why this whole thing started.
Let me finish. I see Lisa. I would like to just finish a comment.
Okay.
Hold on one second.
Sorry.
And then Lisa has the floor after that. The reason that I asked you, I wish I would have known about it before you brought the issues here tonight. I wish someone on the board would have known about it. I'm going to just say again that Facebook and social media is hurting all of us. Because once a comment is made that's not true, it spreads like wildfire. And then we have frustration that you're feeling, and I appreciate what you're feeling, and I'm not discounting.
Thank you.
But what I'd like to do, and that's why I look back, because I said,
I think that Monique might have emailed on my behalf stating that I was going to be doing something. Monique?
Yes, we talked.
Okay. Yeah. I think she gave you guys a heads up in some way or another. Not, I mean, like I said, this was open to every person. It wasn't a hidden thing.
All of our emails are public.
Right.
Most of our cell phones are public. My cell phone is public. And I can tell you that you need to reach out. What I'd like you to just take for a minute and understand. These meetings right now are not public meetings. This is by law. This is a meeting of the Board of Education held in public.
Right.
So the town halls, we've had town halls before. We've had one-on-ones. We invite you to meet with the superintendent. We invite you to meet with any of us. There's no.
Serve on the Health and Safety Committee.
And some of them.
Oh, please.
I actually made my own committee.
I tried to get on that committee. They wouldn't even let me on any committee. That's such bullshit.
I want to validate what you're saying
Bullshit.
and just
So
encourage
full of
you
it.
to use the resources that you have in front of you instead of sitting there frustrated.
Well, that was part of that meeting. That's what I was going to get at next.
But then after you had your meeting, you needed to reach out. You could
And
reach
we
out
are.
to me as
We're actually doing some homework
to the
right
vice
now.
president.
There's subcommittees out right now, meeting on certain things such as security, threat assessment team, mental wellness awareness, bullying, the current discipline policy. I personally have made calls to friends of mine that are on the Board of Ed at William Floyd, friends of mine that are on the Board of Ed at Pat Med. I've told the teachers numerous throughout this whole country and got polls back from them. We're doing our legwork before we're coming to you because of things like this. This dialogue back and forth doesn't get anywhere.
And I would just respectfully ask, before you are critical of what we're trying to do, the reason that we wanted the information on the security now is so that everybody had the same understanding as the board. And then with all of that understanding before us, then we can make the positive changes. One of the positive changes that we made was hiring and appointing a security director with Mr. Busby. So we are talking about the security measures. We even had a special meeting of the Board of Education about disciplinary issues before the Florida shooting, a day
How would
before
we
the
know
Florida
that?
shooting because of other situations that were taking place. So we are on the forefront. And I will just reiterate something, Lisa, I know you're next. I will just
That was
reiterate
all
something
executive
that
session.
Mr.
We
Briggs
wouldn't have known
brought up, and that's not to be withholding information from you. There's just certain things by law, which is
So
why we
tired
have
of
our
hearing
attorneys
that.
at every meeting, that can't be discussed. And I understand what you're saying about if someone commits a certain infraction, it should be expected. But there's different circumstances, and even if someone has a disability that's related to the behavior, there's restrictions that the school district has, and that's where I think the disconnect is, where the public, is frustrated. Although I will, also acknowledge Dr. Griffin what he said earlier, the perception and what the kids are feeling, and then what you feel. But if we're talking in a bubble and talking to each other but not talking to the board, then we're going to continue to have this frustration. So I don't want to belabor the issue anymore. It's 10 to 11. And I want to thank you for the comments that you made, but I just want to ask you to restructure it a little bit and include the board, and then I think we can find a better way.
Okay.
All right? Sure.
I wear many hats. I started out as a frustrated mom in the district in 2002 and went through PTA council. I'm on a school board, and I've been a certified secondary social studies teacher for 32 years, so I get very frustrated. As a teacher, we get a little didactic. We want to spread positive and accurate information. I taught participation in government, and I'm probably going to lose my current job, and I'm going to say this. I work at Pat Med High School, and I'm glad my child goes here.
Whatever.
They may have very good public forums, but there are rooms that I go into there that I can't even backlock because the door lock doesn't work.
Well,
So
that's
I'm
why
going to
I
leave it
said
at that.
Yeah, we
So
definitely
just
have to
because
get it.
somebody has a public forum and a charismatic superintendent does not make it so. And I was in the elementary building today.
Really? Then why are you hiring an $80,000 PR person? Isn't that the point?
And I will reiterate one more time, we had no proposal from the state, from Assemblyman Murray, about a transfer to a school free of charge, none.
Thank you.
Okay?
I just have a quick comment.
Yes,
I don't want to belabor the point with this.
Oh,
Let's see you later.
You gonna be around tomorrow?
So, I'm only,
Call
I
you.
want to back up, I just want to quickly say, if there's a time that you'd like to sit down and we could talk, I'd be happy to do that, whether you want that or not is okay.
You know what, you
Facebook
should get
is
off
not
Facebook,
the,
that's your
you know
problem.
what, Ms. Alfine, I'm not speaking.
All right.
You know what, Ms. Alfine, I'm not speaking to you, Ms. McDonald. The point I'm getting at is that Facebook is a poor outlet of communication, and I probably shouldn't speak up as much as I do, but there's plenty of parents on there who like to hear some clarity. Whether I do it well or not is open for interpretation. I never want to allay your fears on your children and their safety. That's only something you can determine. I try to add clarity to rumors because rumors I think are dangerous. Again, I may be good at it, I may be bad at it, and it may be open to interpretation of whoever's listening. So don't think that I'm not concerned about what you're fearful about, or I want to allay your fears in any way. I often say I have kids in the school too, and I feel safe. I mean, my kids are in the same building as yours are. So I don't want to belabor the whole thing. I'd love to speak to you anytime you'd like. I have a feeling that we probably have more common ground than you think. But I do want to address one quick comment. I think I understood you make an accusation that something happened to my kid would have a fast route out the back door.
Well,
I mean, in all honesty, you really don't know me or how I approach being a parent and a board member, because my kid would probably be the last one out the door.
The point is, Chris, is the way that you put it on Facebook.
Like I
You
said,
have
it's not.
inside information and you can't
I don't want to
share
go back. We should talk to you
Yeah.
another time.
That's
But like I said, it's not. A lot of times I'm typing on my phone, in transit, because I believe people deserve a response immediately. It's just character.
I think it's
And all right.
So that's it.
I just need to make a comment to that in the Facebook page. I think we should put this on the agenda for the next meeting for the board to discuss, because we keep going round and round with problems from comments that are made by board members. I am restricted from being on certain Facebook pages, so I cannot give you a comment even if I wanted to. I am restricted because I don't have a child going to school in this district. Yet I'm the board president of the Board of Education. So that in itself, I think, is a problem. Just to be able to monitor what's going on. I had no idea what you were feeling because I don't have access to the site in which you were communicating. To the board members, I would just have to say you have to exercise caution with what you're speaking to on Facebook, because we've seen what happens. And in closing about the issue of security, I just want to also I'd like to also say that I attended a school event recently and was standing next to one of the responders, and it was right after the Florida event, and so I asked that responder, how is it going? And knowing that they were going to be very taxed in what was happening over the last couple of weeks because of the Florida situation. And that responder gave me a great deal of comfort in what was said to me, and what was said was that they had their own children in this school district, and that's how safe they felt about it, because their own children were still going to the school district. So I have a lot of faith in the responders and security that we do have, and those who are still here with us. Thank you for sitting through the presentation tonight, and know that everything that we heard and the comments that we heard will be discussed continually. It's unfortunate with a school district as large as ours, and even though it's not as large as most, we know it's going to have one issue in one area, and we're putting out that fire, and 3 more pop up the next day. But overall, I'm very pleased with the direction of the Board of Education and the work that we're doing together. Someone mentioned earlier in a comment, I don't recall who it was, that they felt there was a disconnect with the board. I don't feel that. We have a disagreement from time to time. We disagree on theory and procedure, but I think this board is trying to work for the best of all. And I disagree with the comment that was made earlier that we didn't talk about school and students and studying tonight. The whole budget is about curriculum and what we have to do. So if we could get off of attacking each other, then maybe we could stay focused more on the children and our faculty and staff, because everyone here, I think, does agree that we have a district that has a lot to be proud of. We saw our virtual enterprise students today. We didn't even get to speak about the success of our basketball team, even though they had a heartbreaking loss at the end of their season. We just saw a high school performance musical that was second to none. So we have a lot to be proud of and more that we have to be talking about. But as you see, it's already 11 o'clock. We had to make 2 meetings into one, and yet we covered a lot of ground. So I said a lot in my closing, but I would just again like to reiterate: Facebook and social media is going to be the ruination of this board and all of us if we don't put our emotions in check and use the system that you have in front of you. We have access through emails, through phones. I meet with people personally, and please take advantage of that so that we can have those conversations, and then we bring those feelings back to the board, or certainly the superintendent and administration. If someone has a personal question of me, I'd be happy to answer it after. Okay? Thank you. Thanks very much. All right. That brings us to closing statements, which I've already made mine. So, Ms. DeSanto, would you like to begin?
All right. Again, would love to invite anyone to attend the Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. That's at district office. And also, right here at Belport High School is the PTSA meeting, which begins at 7 o'clock. And it would be nice to see other parents who have high school students attend that meeting, because quite frankly, we're a rather small but mighty group, and it'd be nice to see a few other people help out with it as we start to plan some of the end of the year activities here at Belport High School. And I just would want to ask, do we have a positive update from the middle school trip?
Not on the app.
Oh, okay. I was wondering. I always like to know that we got a good report, that everybody got there and it's all good. Thank you.
Amy?
I have nothing there.
Dr. Griffin.
No comment.
Did you leave us? She has school tomorrow. You're going to have homework at school.
I'm just going to say a couple of things.
Mike.
Oh, sorry. This board, we work very, very hard, and we think all the time. I'm a parent first before I'm a board. So everything you're feeling, I feel it too. But we just have to figure out the correct and proper ways to handle these situations. I've had 3 kids already go through this district. 3 sons, and now I have 2 daughters. I have 1 in Franklin Law, and I have 1 here in high school. And as I said, we work really, really hard. Most of us do have kids, and we work really, really hard to make sure that things are right. And you have to understand the role of a board member. Everything goes to administration first. So that's what you got to remember. You have to follow the proper chain of command before it gets to the board. And as we said, all our phone numbers are on the calendar, our email addresses. I have no problem with speaking to anybody. You can inbox me, you can call me. I have no problem with speaking. But again, there's certain things we can control and certain things that we cannot. Okay, so don't feel like we don't care. And again, I never heard anything from Dean Merritt. I just feel like, that was kind of throwing us under the bus for something that we have no clue about. Never heard of it before. And I don't know if you remember coming to the meetings all summer, nothing was ever said about Dean Murray, speaking to the board about relocation or anything. So, and I know some of us do speak to Dean Murray quite often, me and Chris, and this was truly a shock that even came out. I never heard anything else. So I just want to reiterate that. And closing remarks. Thank you to the Frank P. Long PTA for their donation of $1,500 in support of the dancing classroom. And thank you to the Gulfport Clippers Baseball Club for their donation of custom padding for the varsity baseball field. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, with no further items to discuss, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by, okay, here we are, Dr. Griffin and Ms. Hunt. We stand adjourned at 11:04.
We didn't vote.
Oh, we didn't vote. Were there any objections? No objections.